Today I'm going to be doing chapters 8 through 15 of Healing in the Dark, and oh my gosh, my mouth is going to be so dry. So I got me some water with my Percy Jackson water bottle that I wanted to show you. I got the bottle at Walmart, and I got the stickers on Amazon. I did make a video about the stickers, so if you want the stickers yourself, you can go look for that video. It was about some stuff I got on Amazon. You can get the stickers in the comments, so there'll be a link. But anyways, oh my gosh, it's time to get back into Healing in the Dark because it's been so long, and there's people just like, can you continue this? And I'm just never in the mood to do it. And like, I have to really feel like doing it. I'm just like, I don't want to get ready to make a video. I don't want to have to look good, whatever. But I will continue it now. So let me open it up. I'm getting there. And this video will be really long, so do expect that, but there will be lots of chapters, so you don't have to go and find a million different videos. And I do this so that I don't have to do it in like different videos, and it's just so much easier for me, and it works. I think it really works for the YouTube algorithm and all of that. So we're just gonna get into the video, and I really hope you enjoy it. Now, if you're wondering why my head is all the way down here, it's because I'm short. So I'm gonna try and actually. That looks a lot better. I'm doing this on my computer, so I don't have to hold a phone, or at least I have a pretty high quality camera, and I don't want a phone to die or whatever. And it's way easier this way. I don't have to edit anything. Live streaming is so much easier. Anyways, enough about me ranting. Let's get into the video because I did do these chapters before, and the video didn't save. So now I have to redo this video again because it didn't save, and that's why I'm going to be doing it on live streams. I'm probably going to just start doing it on live streams from now on because, literally so much easier. So anyway, do expect a really long video. When I did make the video, it took 2 hours. And I'm not even making that up. Okay, so this is chapter 8. Nico's point of view. Nico went from one nightmare to another over and over again. He dreamed of melting into a shadow, and then he dreamed of Tartarus. He dreamed of being trapped in the underworld, then of Bianca. Suddenly, a cool fluid flowed into him and whisked the dreams away. His eyes fluttered open, and he found himself staring into a pair of bright blue eyes. Nico? Will's musical voice asked. Nico groaned and felt a mask over his nose and mouth. He pushed it off, putting his hands over his face. Are you okay? Do you feel okay? Do you remember? He held out a hand to stop the son of Apollo's rambling. It hurt his head. Water, he croaked. I need water. Will leaped into action, grabbing the pitcher and a cup. He poured the water, some spilling over the edge, and came over to Nico. He set the water on the bedside table and helped Nico sit up. Nico groaned with pain as he sat up. He noticed he had an IV and had stickers on his chest from the heart monitor. He was covered in Hedges' dirt packets again and was only in his boxers. He blushed as Will secured him, holding his shoulder as Nico's heart beat faster. Will grabbed the glass of water and tilted it down Nico's throat. Nico swallowed gratefully and grabbed Will's hand, telling him to stop. Will slowly took his hand down, and Nico let his hand fall into Will's. Their hands hit the mattress together as Nico looked into Will's eyes. They stayed like that for a couple of minutes before Will broke the silence. How do you feel? Nico smirked. Like I've been through hell and back. Well, haven't you? Will asked. Nico laughed bitterly. You could say that. An awkward silence fell over the room. Will broke it yet again. Do you remember what happened? Nico thought back to his last memory. He remembered waking up from a nightmare, but wasn't it the one he just had? No, it was different. It was about Tartarus, but something was different about it. Clovis had briefly been there, and then there was a voice yelling at him to wake up. Nico remembered. He felt himself turn red with embarrassment. Yeah, I remember, he muttered, looking down. Do you want to? Nico interrupted the question he hated the most. No. I don't. He never wanted to talk about it. Ever. Okay, but can you answer this? Why do you run? Nico rolled his eyes, looking back at Will. That's a stupid question. Why do you think I ran? Will smiled sadly. I can guess you were embarrassed. Getting scared because of nightmares isn't something I like to advertise, Nico admitted. Will waved away his concern with his hand. There's nothing wrong with nightmares or panic attacks. Panic, panic attack, Nico asked. Will cocked his head in confusion. Yeah, that's what you had, feeling overwhelmed and anxious, like you can't breathe and the walls are closing in, like you want to escape yourself, but you're trapped. Nico realized that he had all of those symptoms. I didn't realize it had a name. Mental health awareness wasn't really a thing back in my day. Well, it's a very important thing nowadays. Nico noticed that Will didn't question his back in my day statement. Did Will even know he was born in the 30s? Will continued. I know you were overwhelmed, but shadow traveling was not a good idea. You almost faded out of existence. Everyone is really worried about you. I wish they wouldn't, Nico said, but he felt fear as well. His memories were starting to come back, and he vaguely recalled shadow traveling to his cabin and immediately losing form. He felt great fear as he passed out, not sure if he would wake up again. Just earlier, I had to kick them out of the infirmary. You have some persistent and stubborn friends. They all really care about you. Nico nodded, absently, thinking about almost becoming a shade again. Will must have noticed that he was zoning out because he spoke again. Do you want to go back to sleep? That's probably going to be the most helpful in your recovery. No, I don't want to go back to sleep. Nico shifted in the bed. He felt the dirt caked on him. Can I wash this dirt off? Will nodded. Of course. Let me draw a warm bath and we can get you in there soon. Will ducked into the bathroom attached to the room. Nico heard water starting to run as Will turned the faucet on. He was in there as the water heated up and emerged a couple minutes later. Will had a towel in his hand and was wiping off the excess water off his hands. He looked at Nico as he started talking. Are you feeling okay? Will, I'm okay. Nico started hacking. Will's face tightened with concern. He strode over to Nico and gripped his shoulders as he finished coughing. Nico had tried to flinch, but had been coughing too hard. He handed Nico another glass of water, which he gratefully accepted. He took big gulps of water, and he finished the glass. Will took it from him and grabbed a stethoscope. He asked Nico to take a deep breath as he placed the cool pad on his back. Will moved the pad to Nico's chest and asked him to repeat his breathing. Nico took deep breaths. You sound like you have some chest tightness, but I don't think there is anything physically blocking your windpipe, Will noted. Nico observed the son of Apollo. He looked exhausted. Nico wondered when the last time he had gotten undisturbed sleep. Nico knew that Will was his healer, but had he been with him the whole time? Nico blushed, feeling like that there were people way more important than him that Will could be helping. Still, Nico was glad that Will was helping to heal him. Even though he still felt like crap, he really wanted to go back to his cabin and just be alone. He didn't want to talk about his escape from the infirmary any further or his de- debilitating nightmares. That was his personal business, and he wanted to keep it that way. Will had finished listening to his breathing and removed the IV. He also took off the stickers on his chest. The room became a lot quieter as the insistent beeping of the heart monitor stopped. The son of Apollo walked back into the bathroom to check the bathtub. The water turned off and Will walked back into the room. The bath is ready. We're going to get all this dirt off you in the shower first. Then you can relax in the bath for a while. You ready? Nico nodded, putting his feet on the floor. He stood up. Sorry. Great. He stood up and crumbled to the floor. Will ran up to catch him. Nico stiffened as he felt Will's muscular arms wrap around him. Will secured him, standing him up before helping Nico stumble to the bathroom. The bathroom was white and had a huge bathtub in the middle of it. Off to the side there was a shower running. Nico walked into the shower. Will turned away to give him some privacy, but Nico left his boxers on. He knew Will was his doctor, but he didn't want to be naked if he didn't have to. Nico held the wall as the hot water melted away the dirt packets. There was shampoo and body wash in the shower. Nico grabbed the shampoo and scrubbed the dirt from his hair. He then took the body wash to fully remove the dirt from his body. He was under the hot water for about 5 minutes. He turned the water off and grabbed the towel that Will was handing to him. His back still turned. Nico grabbed the towel around his waist, even though he still had his boxers on. Will helped Nico out of the shower to take him to the tub. Nico removed the towel. Carefully, Will helped Nico sink into the tub. Nico let out a sigh of relief as the warm water seeped into his skin. Once he was sure the bubbles obscured him, he removed his wet boxers. After throwing them over the side, he closed his eyes and let his head rest against the edge of the tub. I'll just be in the other room if you need me, Will smiled and ducked out of the room. Nico settled more comfortably in the tub and felt himself drift into a light sleep. Will's point of view. He had left Nico in the bathroom a half an hour ago, and he had not heard any noises. He re-entered the bathroom to see Nico dozing in the tub. A small smile crept onto Will's features as he moved to get the boy out of the tub. Before he could, Nico grabbed his wrist. He looked towards Nico's face and saw the boy looking at him. Sorry, I thought you wanted to sleep. I was just going to get you to bed. Nico cleared his throat. Will realized that most of the bubbles had dissipated. Nico was embarrassed. All right. Will turned, grabbing another towel. He handed it to Nico. He turned his back as he heard the son of Hades get out of the tub. Nico coughed, indicating it was okay for Will to turn around. Nico was sitting on the side of the tub, getting out, seeming to have exhausted him. The towel was loosely wrapped around his waist. With all the dirt and grim gone, Will noticed the slight abs on his chest. With the right amount of nutrition and training, Nico could be very fit. Not that he wasn't already, just more fit. He shook these thoughts away as he approached Nico. I need to change your bandages, he said, indicating Nico's arm. Nico nodded his consent. Will removed his bandages and looked at the werewolf claw marks. They were healing well. He placed the bandages in the trash and lightly dried Nico's mutilated arms with another towel. He sighed as he passed over the scars on his wrist again. He really needed to bring it up to Nico. He gained eye contact with him. Hey, so Nico, while I was taking care of your arms, I noticed something on your wrist. Nico tensed as if expecting the question. Will looked down, trying not to make him uncomfortable. That's when he saw the insides of Nico's thighs were ravaged with little cuts. What are those? Nico tried to hide his legs further with the towel, but Will stopped him. While still protecting his dignity, Will moved the towel aside to closely examine the scars. There were too many to count, and some of them were deep. On closer examination, Will knew that they had been made by a razor blade. I think you know exactly what they are, Nico said, trying to stand up to get away from Will, but he was still too weak. He lost his balance and wanted to catch him. Nico looked up into Will's eyes. The onyx looked shuddered. Tears threatened them. Can I please have some clothes? Will sat Nico back down on the edge of the tub and went into the bathroom. He grabbed some boxes and a clean t-shirt. He gave these to Nico and turned again to give him some privacy. While his back was turned, Nico tried to walk past him but stumbled again. Will caught him and scooped him up in his arms before he could protest. He carefully placed Nico on the bed. While they had been in the bathroom and Nymph had changed Nico's sheets, so they weren't covered in dirt. We need to talk about this, Will said, crossing his arms over his chest. Nico tried to push past him again, but Will intercepted him, his hands on his shoulders. Let me go. I want to be alone. You're not going anywhere. You are not strong enough. Yeah, I'm not strong enough. That's why I do this. Now you are getting it. Well, Nico said emotionally, tears on the verge of falling. He shrugged Will's hands off him. Nico, I didn't mean it like that. Nobody ever does. They tell me to take care of myself and not overexert my powers and whatever, but I'm a child of the big three. Some expected to be this awe-inspiring demigod with cosmic powers, but I am not. I can't control half of my powers. I use my powers to murder people in cold blood, and I can't use my powers to bring my sister back. I couldn't use my powers to get myself out of Tartarus. My powers only made me see it for what it truly was. His voice cracked at this point. Will opens his mouth to say something, but Nico was on a roll. And when I do successfully use my powers, I terrify the living crap out of everyone, and they end up hating me, so I end up alone because they are scared of me. But I am the most scared of me. I had killed Octavian, who may have inadvertently killed Leo. You should hate me. Everyone hates me. So no one would really care if I was dead. Stop! Will's quiet voice stopped Nico's speech. Will understood that Nico had needed to let out all the emotions that he'd been experiencing the past few days, and Will was glad that Nico had shared instead of keeping it bottled up and running away, but Will had to stop him. Let me make something very clear. You are most certainly not alone. I had to kick your friends out of the infirmary after they snuck in. You are also not alone in dealing with your problem. There are lots of people willing to help you if you just let them. You can't just run away until you don't want to talk about it. I understand you've been through hell and back, but you're not going to get better until you talk about what you've been through. Nobody wants you dead. So many people love you and care about you. I can assure you that I will do everything in my power to help you in any way I can. You are not alone, Will finished, breathing heavily. He had wanted to say that to the son of Hades for a long time. Nico was speechless. He opened his mouth and closed it again. He then looked as though he'd decide what he wanted to say. Whatever, Souls, I'm not having this conversation with you. Will mentally rolled his eyes. You will one day. You will one day. You will be able to see that you can trust me, and I can help you, Will stated matter-of-factly. Nico looked down. Will sat down in his chair and continued looking at Nico's thighs. They were littered with scars. Will's face dropped as he saw how many there were. Will lightly ran his gloveless hand over the scar tissue. Nico tensed and tried to scoot away, but Will held him in place. Nico continued to struggle, and Will looked up at him, giving him his best evil eye. Nico stopped, surprised to see the anger in Will's eyes. Will looked back down and began muttering a healing spell under his breath. He moved his fingers across Nico's thighs, and the cuts slowly started to fade to light scars. Will moved his hands to Nico's wrists and did the same. Will moved his hands back onto Nico's thighs and looked at the boy. Nico looked shocked. I just gave you a clean slate and a second chance. Please don't mess it up, Will quietly said. He felt a little lightheaded. It had taken a lot of energy to heal those scars, as there were a lot of them. He slowly removed his hands and sat down in the chair. He took his head in his hands and tried to get some control back. He was shaking, so he took some deep breaths. He felt a tentative hand on his shoulder and looked up to see Nico looking at him, his hand outstretched. Thank you for everything. If Will hadn't been looking at Nico, he wouldn't have believed that he had said it. He nodded at Nico. Nico smiled a little and leaned back. You can finish your examination now. It won't be a problem. Will slowly got up. He pulled on some gloves and started looking Nico over. Once the cuts had healed, the scars fading. Will looked at the stitches again, and once he confirmed they were healing, he rewrapped his arms. He prepared another IV for Nico, who he guessed wasn't going to be eating. It was enough to last him until the next morning. Maybe then he could convince him to eat. He insisted it into Nico. He didn't tell Nico, but he had spiked it with the sleeping draught so Nico could get some undisturbed sleep. As the liquid entered his body, Nico's eyes started drooping. No, Will, no, I don't want to. Please don't make me sleep, please. His pleas were cut short as he slumped back onto the pillows. Will sighed as he pulled the covers over Nico. He also drew the curtains closed. He shut off the light and quietly shut the door before he walked into the dark infirmary. Brandon nodded at him from the desk. Will thought about lecturing his sibling for letting everyone in the infirmary, but he had a feeling that he wouldn't have been able to stop all of them. Jason, Raina, and Hazel were outside the infirmary. Will sighed and walked over to the door. He pushed it open, and the trio looked up at him. They stood up quickly from the chairs they had brought to the hallway. Nico is fine, Will answered Hazel's question. He woke up about an hour ago, showered, and now he's asleep again. The trio nodded in relief. Will decided he needed to apologize. Hey, I'm sorry about earlier, but Nico needed his space. I should be the one apologizing. Raina spoke up, much to Will's surprise. You were just trying to do your job, and I didn't respect that. I can tell that you really care about your patients and doing the best you can. Thank you for taking care of him. Will nodded. It's the least I could do. Silence briefly settled over them. Raina and Hazel, if you would like, you can go sit with him, but please be quiet. The two Romans looked at each other before opening the infirmary doors to see Nico. Will looked back at Jason. You can go in when one of them comes out. I want no more than 2 people in there at a time. Jason nodded. I understand, but the son of Jupiter didn't move. What's up? Jason bit his lip and adjusted his glasses. I still really want to see, is Nico okay physically and, mentally? Had he told you anything? It was now Will's turn to bite his lip. He didn't know how much Jason knew and if Nico wanted his secret out. Well, physically he is healing, and mentally, well, I don't really know. He's going through a lot and won't let anyone in, Will admitted. Jason hung his head. I know, I just want to help. How did he get so bad without anyone noticing? I thought he and I were friends, Will sighed. From what you told me, Nico's been alone for a while, and I can't imagine what Tartarus must have done to him. But here we are now. He doesn't have to be alone anymore, Jason said. He looked up at Will. We have to help him. I know, and we will. But please, keep this between us, okay? Don't say anything to him or anyone else. Nico doesn't need any more attention or crap from people. Of course, I'm not stupid. I just want to help him. Me too, Grace. Me too. Time for Chapter 9. Ugh, man, all that water mentions making me thirsty. Nico's point of view. Sunlight streamed into the room and danced across Nico's eyelids. His eyes slid open to a sun-filled room. He felt a weight pressed down on his chest. It wasn't uncomfortable, just the opposite. It was comforting and brought him solace. Solace. He looked down and saw a blonde mop of hair. Will Solace. Solace? Solace. Anyway, Nico blushed and heard the heart monitor by his head start to beat faster. He looked in wonder at the son of Apollo. Will should have hated him. Nico had yelled at him and told him all the horrible parts of himself. He had seen Nico's scars. He had watched Nico let Octavian kill himself. Nico sighed and put his hands over his face, trying to relax. He was surprised Will hadn't woken up. Then again, Will had been up for most of the night, caring for Nico. Nico checked the clock. 7 a.m. Nico placed his hand on Will's head, whispering Will's name. Will started to move, but only to nestle further into Nico's chest and his hand. Nico started playing with Will's hair. It was smooth and golden. He smiled and then immediately felt ashamed of himself. He shouldn't be thinking this about Will or any guy. It was unnatural, as his mother had told him so many times. Although his memories had been washed away in a week, as he got older, they started to come back. The society he grew up in told him that homosexuality was a disease. It's why he had so much self-loathing when he had a crush on Percy. But no one was there to judge, so he nodded his fingers in Will's locks. Will sighed contentedly and rolled into Nico's hand. He continued running his finger through Will's hair and eventually lost track of time. Will started to stir awake. Nico's hand dropped and pretended to be asleep. Will's head came off Nico's chest. Shist. Will must have meant not to fall asleep, especially not on his patient. The next thing Nico knew, Will's hand was under his shirt, checking the stickers from the heart monitors. Nico tensed, not appreciating Will's touch, and Will's hand froze. He slowly moved it and checked Nico's pulse. Nico willed himself to relax. He felt his heart slow down, and Will's hand was on his wrist. He held it there for a moment or two, and then started tracing the fading scars littering his wrist. Oh, Nico, what am I going to do with you? Just let me in. Let me help. Will whispered, unaware that Nico was wide awake. Nico's hand dropped, and Will removed the IV from his other arm. Nico suddenly heard footsteps and a knock at the door. Come in quietly, Will said. Someone opened the door. Nico heard a voice issuing from the direction of the door. Morning, Will. Do you want to go down to the pavilion and grab some food for Nico? I'll keep the door open and keep an eye on him, a girl's voice said. Must be one of the Apollo's kids. Will's voice sounded in the quiet room. Yeah, that would be great. Make sure none of his friends sneak in here, okay? I don't want another fiasco like yesterday. Nico heard footsteps as Will left the room, and the other door closed. He was alone. He let out a breath and continued pondering the son of Apollo. Will was being unbelievably nice to him. Why, though? Because he liked Nico? Will would be disgusted if he knew that Nico was gay. Nico couldn't let Will find out his secret. He calmed himself down as he heard the door to his room open. It wasn't Will's footsteps, so it must have been one of his siblings. They started moving around in the cabinet, so Nico guessed that was cleaning up everything. He listened to the kid of Apollo cleaning everything up. About 5 minutes later, another pair of footsteps entered the room, and then came Will's voice. He's still asleep then, he asked his sibling. They must have nodded. Good, he needs it, but I have to wake him up. He needs more food than sleep right now. Nico heard a tray being placed on the table. He heard the second set of footsteps leaving the room, closing the door. Wake up, Nico, Will murmured, lightly shaking Nico awake. Nico started moving as he was just waking up. His eyes fluttered open to see Will's blue orb centimeters away. The son of Apollo's face broke out into a huge grin. Good morning, death boy. Don't call me that, Nico said, slowly sitting up. Okay, fine. Good morning, sunshine. Nico growled at him, causing Will to laugh. I brought you breakfast. Will moved the rolling table so it was across Nico's bed. Nico looked at the tray. There was a plate with eggs, toast, and bacon. Nico's nose wrinkled at the smell. This did not go unnoticed by Will. What's wrong? Don't like eggs? I usually don't eat breakfast, Nico admitted. Not a big fan of breakfast foods. How can you not like breakfast foods? Will looked personally offended. Nico shrugged, not really having an answer. Well, you may not like it, but you have to eat something. You haven't eaten real food for a while, and you need to build your strength back up. It's not good to skip meals. Nico really did not want to eat, but to satisfy Will, he took a bite of the eggs. He swallowed them, grimacing at the feel of them down his throat. Will's face lit up with concern, but Nico waved him off, saying he had just swallowed weirdly. Will smiled. Good. Now I want you to try to eat everything on your plate, but do it slowly. Too much food too fast will make you sick. After that, you can have some visitors. Will turned away, grabbing his own plate of food. He sat down in the chair beside Nico and munched on his breakfast. Nico looked back at his plate, dreading that finishing the whole thing. There was a lot of food. He wouldn't be able to finish it even if he had full strength. He took another bite, which he struggled to swallow down. He chewed slowly as Will had instructed. He took one last bite before stopping with the eggs. He decided that bread would probably be okay. He managed to swallow down about 2 bites of his toast. Is that all you're eating? Will asked with concern. He had already finished his food in the 5 minutes it had taken Nico to eat 3 bites. I'm not hungry, Nico said. Will's eyebrows furrowed. You barely ate anything. How about trying the bacon? Don't tell me you hate bacon, too. With dread, he bit into the bacon. That was the breaking point, as he hadn't had meat in forever. The food started making its way back up his throat. He pushed past Will and ran into the bathroom. He managed to make it to the toilet just in time. He hunched over the toilet as he expelled all the contents of his stomach. When he finally stopped, he noticed a hand rubbing his back. Will. Will had watched him spill his guts out. Gross. Nico sat up, wiping off his chin. He looked at Will, who had handed him a glass of water. Gosh, Nico, I'm so sorry. I didn't think that you could handle it. I didn't know that you couldn't handle it. I'm so sorry. Nico waved him away, saying it was fine, but it wasn't. Nico felt awful. He wished he hadn't eaten. He felt sick to his stomach, and couldn't even think about eating without his throat and stomach protesting. He shakily stood and made his way back to his bed. He sunk into it, and Will followed him back into the room. Nico wouldn't meet Will's eyes. Nico, I'm so sorry. It wouldn't have made you eat all that if I had known. Will apologized. Nico said nothing. We can try something lighter at lunch right now, though. I'll go get your friends. They've been outside all morning. Will walked out of the room. Nico downed the glass of water Will had given him, trying to wash away the taste of lime in his mouth. He pushed his tray of food away as well, the smell of it making his stomach turn. A moment later, he heard a thundering of footsteps heading to his door. Will's voice could be heard in the chaos. Only 3 people in there at a time. The rest needed to stay in the hall. He braced himself as the door opened, revealing 8 demigods. Raina, Jason, and Hazel entered the room. Nico was surprised to see the 2 girls, considering they had just left camp. Then again, if he really had almost destroyed himself shadow traveling, he wasn't surprised they'd shown up. He raised his arm in greeting at Percy, Annabeth, Frank, and Piper, who were following Will's instructions and waiting outside the door. They all waved back, looking relieved to see him awake and okay. All his friends were there, but there was a presence missing that everyone felt. Leo. Nico could sense the sadness emanating from the collective group. Over the years, Nico had gotten better at reading people and their emotions, usually only negative emotions, though. Maybe it was because he was the son of Hades. The sadness was very well matched by everyone, but Nico could tell they were all missing the son of Hephaestus. Nico missed him too, and already decided that after he was free of the infirmary, that he was going to go to the underworld, try to find Leo. There had been something suspicious about his death, so Nico wanted to investigate. Will entered the room and stood off to the side. He crossed his arms over his chest, as if regretting his decision to let everyone back. But the trio in the room had already made themselves comfortable. Raina spoke first. Nico, are you feeling okay? Yeah, I'm okay. Good. Then I won't feel bad about doing this. Nico felt a hand slap across his face. That's what you get for shadow jumping when you weren't strong enough, you imbecile. What were you thinking? Raina slap left Nico's face stinging. He brought his hand to his face, rubbing it indignantly, giving Raina a death glare. She crossed her arms over her chest and met his death glare with a scorching look on her features. Nico looked to Hazel for aid. Don't look at me. Raina's right. You were pretty idiotic to do that. Nico looked towards Will. have slapped you too, but it's against my policy to beat a patient," Will stated calmly. "Randall had every right to do that. You scared the living shit out of all of us. You deserved worse than a slap for disappearing on us like that," Jason said. Nico felt betrayed and collapsed against his pillows. Me against the world. "You never answered my question," Raina reminded. "What were you thinking, shadow traveling like that when you weren't strong enough? You could have melted into a shade." "If you guys are just here to interrogate me, you can leave," Nico defended. "No, we came here to check on you. How are you, honestly?" Hazel said, grabbing her brother's hand. "I'm just tired, that's all," Nico said. But they could tell he was lying, but they didn't press it. They started talking about what had happened at the camp for the past couple of days and the activities for the rest of the day. They all did they did all the talking, so Nico just relaxed. Time for chapter 10. Will's point of view. Will watched as the demigods interacted with Nico. He could have sworn a small smile on the son of Hades a couple of times. Will checked the time. Nico's friends had already been there for an hour. It was already 10. It was time for Will to get back to work. He ducked into the bathroom to clean it. He closed the door behind him, but soon heard it open and close again. He looked to see Jason standing in the bathroom. "Hey, Will, I know we talked last night, but how was Nico? Did he have any nightmares? Did he eat something?" Will sighed, sitting on the edge of the bathtub. "He slept through the night, and the sleeping draught kept the nightmares away. He slept fine last night. And this morning, well, he ate something, but it all came up again." "How much did he eat on the Argo, too?" "Not much. I mean, he did survive for a week on just pomegranate seeds, so his stomach must have shrunk, but he barely ate any afterward." "A week? On only pomegranate seeds?" Will was aghast. Will couldn't believe everything that the son of Hades had gone through. It was unfathomable. Will flushed, realizing that he was giving more information about Nico than he probably should have. Yeah, it's a complicated story. I'm not going to press you, but if Nico wasn't more honest with me, I don't know how to help him," Will admitted. A thought occurred to him. Does he even want to get better? Deep down, I think he wants to be happy and healthy, but he doesn't think he deserves it, Jason said, looking lost in thought. He blinked and slightly shook his head as if he had just gotten sprayed with water. "I don't know why I keep saying stuff like that. Nico likes his privacy, and I'm totally invading that right now. You are just easy to talk to," Will supplied. Will nodded. "I get that a lot. I've been told by the Iris cabin that I have a calming aura." Will used his finger quotations. "Yeah, that's what it is," Jason remarked. Will stood from the edge of the tub. He walked to Jason, clapping him on the shoulder. "You don't have anything to worry about. I would never use any of this against Nico or hurt him in any way. I just want to help him." "That's what we all want," Jason commented, and his head turned back towards the door. "I'd better be going back before the others wonder why we are both in the bathroom." Will laughed. "Yeah, I might start some pretty interesting rumors. And you know how easily those spread camp." Jason grinned as he slipped out of the bathroom again. Will heard the small conversation in the room as he went back to cleaning. The bathroom was relatively clean, as these back bedrooms were rarely used, only for emergencies. After he finished folding the towels, he re-entered the room. The seats had been cycled, and now Percy and Annabeth were in the room. Hazel hadn't left her brother's side. Raina also stood by Nico's head. When Will emerged from the bathroom, she gained eye contact with him as if daring him to say something about there being too many people in the room. Kept his mouth shut, however, not wanting to incur the wrath of the Praetor again. "Hey, Will," Hazel called. Will looked over to the girl. "Nico's been cooped up in here for a while now. Do you think he could have lunch with us in the pavilion?" Will looked at Nico. He didn't look as if he was opposed to the idea, but that was probably because Will wouldn't be breathing down his neck about how much he ate. "That depends. Is he going to come back to the infirmary?" "Yeah, of course. We'll bring him back right after lunch," Hazel reassured. Will nodded. "I guess that'd be okay, but I need to do an exam before I let him go, just to make sure he is stable." "He is sitting right here, and I am fine," Nico said. "I think I'll be okay for a couple of hours without my doctor hovering." "I wouldn't have to hover if you didn't try to escape my infirmary at every opportunity," Will shot back. Nico scowled. "I haven't tried to escape. I've been in my bed all night." Will laughed. "You were asleep. That doesn't count." "Are you forgetting that you ran from the infirmary the other night?" Raina pointed out. "Gonna explain why?" Nico visibly became uncomfortable. If he started fiddling with the skull ring on his finger, Will guessed that Nico running because of a nightmare wasn't common knowledge. The son of Hades was probably embarrassed by his reaction. Nico didn't answer, so Raina spoke up again. I'm not trying to interrogate, we are just worried about you. We want to know what's going on with you. Nothing is going on, I'm fine, Nico looked overwhelmed. Will decided to intervene. Alright, guys, it's time for y'all to head back out. Will informed. He spoke over the protest. You'll see him at lunch, but I have to do my exam first. Just come back around noon to drag him to lunch. He ushered the four demigods out of the room. They all said their goodbyes, and soon enough the room was empty besides Nico and Will. Nico looked relieved when he noticed Will looking at him. His face adopted a scowl. I didn't need you to defend me against Raina. I'm not a damsel in distress. I wasn't trying to defend you or anything. It was just time for them to go, Will fibbed. Nico didn't look convinced. And you could have fooled me, that you aren't a damsel in distress. You have spent the better part of your time in the infirmary playing Sleeping Beauty. Nico's eyes filled with confusion and his face turned red. You think I'm a beauty? Will laughed nervously. Yes. That was a Disney reference. How do you know the fairy tale of Sleeping Beauty? I missed a lot of years, Nico looking off into the distance as if trying to remember. Will noticed that was the second time Nico had referred to a lot of time passing. Earlier that week they had been talking about mental health. Nico had said, back in my day. He had thought that the son of Hades was just exaggerating. But he had just done it again. What had happened in Nico's past? Meaning Will asked for clarification. Nico blinked at the question. Oh, I meant growing up, didn't watch a lot of movies. Will sensed he was lying but didn't press. A couple of moments passed before Will spoke. Okay, let's see how you are healing. After Nico's exam, Will had released him to his friends before he himself had passed out in the Apollo cabin until 5 o'clock. He returned to the infirmary and was shocked to see Nico there. He was with Jason and Raina. With hushed tones, Jason informed that Nico had eaten a little but had pushed half his plate into the fire as an offering to his father. Will had sighed, saying he would put another IV into Nico. Nico couldn't spend the rest of his life getting food from a tube. For the rest of the night, Nico requested to be alone and Will obliged, checking in on Nico from time to time. Every time Nico had been staring off into space, looking at nothing, Will wondered what was going through Nico's mind during this time. He had managed to get some dinner into Nico. After getting him to eat, Will had taken the night off, leaving Kayla in charge. He attended the camp sing-along and socialized with his friends, who had felt like he hadn't seen for weeks, but Nico was still in the back of his mind. It was currently 11 p.m. and he was returning to the infirmary for the night shift. His nap had done wonders for him, but he was still exhausted. However, because Nico was stable, Will would be able to sleep in the infirmary that night as well. Nico was healing faster than Will thought he would, depending on his condition during the night. Nico would be allowed to return to his own cabin. Will would be sad to see the son of Hades go, but he made a vow to keep talking to him. He had enjoyed getting to know a little bit more about Nico. The crush that Will had on Nico during the Titan War had reignited. While they had barely interacted during the short times Nico was at camp, Will had admired and fallen for him from afar. The boy had immediately attracted him the moment Will had seen him. He was shrouded in mystery, which intrigued Will. The power he exuded during the Battle of the Labyrinth as well as in Manhattan against Kronos was alluring. Will felt as though the crush he had on Nico was far-fetched, as a demigod as powerful as Nico would never go for someone like Will. But then Nico materialized in front of him during the battle against the Romans, and Will saw a different side of the son of Hades, a vulnerable side. Some of the mystique and mystery surrounding Nico disappeared, and Will realized that Nico was just as human as the rest of them. And it just intensified his feelings. Nico wasn't just some hero. He was a human with vulnerabilities and fears and insecurities. With these thoughts, he walked into Nico's room. Nico was still awake. He looked up as Will approached. You should get some sleep, Will stated, adjusting Nico's pillows. Nico shifted away from him. Will sat down in his chair. You should take your own advice, Solace. I'll sleep when you do, Death Boy. Don't call me that. Okay, Sunshine. Will you shut up if I go to sleep? Perhaps. Fine. Good night, Solace. Good night, D'Angelo. Nico flipped so he was lying on his side, facing away from Will. After 10 minutes of listening to his breathing, Will knew Nico was still awake. Can't sleep. I don't want to. Do you want a sleeping drought? No. Nico, you need sleep. No, I don't. I'll be fine, Will mentally cursed. He needed to get Nico to sleep. He carefully placed his hand on Nico's back. Nico protested, fidgeting away, but Will held him there, saying he was only trying to help. Nico relaxed, letting Will rub circles into his spine. This calmed the son of Hades down to where he could fall into sleep. Will continued the circles for a little while before getting up from his chair. He stretched out his back and fiddled with the monitors, setting them so he would be able to hear them from the main infirmary. He left the door open and walked to one of the empty beds. He set an alarm on his watch for 3 a.m. so he could check on Nico during the night. He climbed under the covers and, with the thoughts of Nico D'Angelo, drifted to sleep. Great dream. Nico's point of view. He was running on the body of the primordial being chased by some unknown creature. He didn't know what it was, but he was terrified. He came to the edge of the river. He couldn't jump across. He turned to face the monster, drawing his Stygian iron sword. He didn't see it, but sensed a figure to the side of him. He swung around to face Bianca? Bianca mi saw some Italian. Bianca smiled wickedly. Going to kill me? Something again? I didn't kill you, I swear. Bianca threw her head back and laughed. Ha ha, you know I did. Getting you a stupid mytho magic figurine. I died because of the stupid game you played as a kid. You let me die. Your own stupid actions killed me. Nico fell to his knees. No, please. I didn't ask you to. Percy said he would keep you safe. He promised. He was cut off. Percy, Percy, Percy. He is all you think about, huh? Well, that is absolutely. Bianca changed into another form. One Nico remembered from a vision and vaguely from a memory. Disgusting. Do you hear me? You loving another man, it is unspeakable. You should be thrown into the mental hospital because you are sick. And so Nico was sobbing. I don't love Percy anymore. I'm not gay. Liar. You stop feeling for the boy. You should be punished. You should be. His mother changed into someone worse. His father. Killed. I am ashamed to have you as a son. You are a disgrace. You are weak. You should not be the Ghost King. You can't wield such power. Father, please. Hades raised his staff as if to hit him. Nico shielded himself as Hades continued yelling. I am disgusted. My own son on his knees weeping. Pathetic. Bianca was so much better. You are worthless and you are alone, just as you should be. No friends, no family, no place to call your... The figure changed. Home. Nico's heart stopped. Percy Jackson was standing before him. Percy. His voice cracked with emotion. Oh yes, it is me, Percy said, an evil smile appearing on his face. Nico was sobbing and shaking. You really believe Camp Half-Blood is your home? Please, you do not belong in either. You are an outcast, a freak, a fag. How did he know? Nico questioned. No, your deepest secret is out. I thought you just idolized me, but no, you wanted me. You desired me. You still do. No, Nico croaked, but it was a feeble attempt to lie. Don't lie. I know your feelings. They are disgusting. I can't believe you think that you would have a chance with me. How could I ever love you? How could anyone love you? Nico screamed in anguish. Percy changed into something terrifying. The goddess Achilles, her bone fingers wrapping around Nico's arm. Ah, look at you, you poor, pathetic son of Hades. I would try to put some misery in your life, but it is more misery than I can handle. She released her grip, and Nico was falling and falling. He fell for what seemed like forever until a light shone into his dream. That was a deep chapter. Now we're going on to chapter 11. He woke up with a scream rippling from his throat. He shot up as if he had been electrocuted. He reached with a shaking hand to his bedside table, where he kept a small knife, but he couldn't find it. He clenched his fist. He felt a tentative hand on his shoulder. It was Achilles, ready to put more misery into his life. He pulled away from his attacker, ready to fight, but the hand kept gripping him. Nico, stop! Stop struggling. It's just me. Nico stopped as he recognized Will's voice. The memory cleared. Instead of the goddess, Will saw his concerned face was inches from him. His hands, which were on Nico's shoulders, were slightly glowing. Nico desperately looked around. Instead of Tartarus, he was in the infirmary. Nico, look at me. He gained eye contact with Will. His blue eyes were bright with concern. Suddenly, the memory still seeping in. The blue eyes flickered to sea green. Percy's eyes. Disgusting. The word flashed across his mind. Nico reeled back, trying to get out of Will's grasp. He pulled back forcefully, hitting his head against the metal headboard. Pathetic! His father's voice rang out in his head. Nico grasped his head in physical pain and emotional turmoil. Get out of my head! Nico screamed. He dug his nails into his scalp, trying to rip the voices out. Nico felt resistance in his arms. Someone was trying to pull his hands away from his head. Nico fought them, wanting to curl up into a ball, but eventually, the person overpowered him. Through tears, Nico saw Will's face and realized he was talking. You're going to hurt yourself! Stop! Will ordered. Nico still fought the son of Apollo, trying to wrap his arms around himself. Let me go! You are having a panic attack, Nico. Will's voice was calm, but Nico could sense the fear beneath his words. You need to calm down. Nico's chest was tight, his heart beating out of his chest. He couldn't stop shaking. Help me, he whimpered, not knowing what to do. Make it stop! Will saw on the bed, pulling Nico closer to him. His arms encircled the son of Hades, holding him close to his chest. Nico wrapped his arms around Will, clenching his fists. Don't do that, Will said quietly. Release the tension, or you're going to hurt yourself. I can't, Nico sobbed. Then give it to me, Will said. Nico slowly released the fist. He fisted Will's shirt in his hands and clenched that instead. The pain in his hands lessened. Nico clutched Nico tightly. While Nico didn't usually like to be touched, feeling trapped during hugs, Will holding him tightly made him feel safe. It helped to ground him to reality. It hurts, Nico moaned. He couldn't breathe. My chest. Deep breaths are restricting the flow of oxygen, so that's why your chest hurts. Take deep breaths. I can't breathe, Nico gasped. Yes, you can. It just hurts. Deep breathing will make the pain go away. The pain never stops, Nico sobbed. Tears were flooding down his face. He pressed his face against Will's chest, trying to ground himself. He could feel Will's chest rumbling as he spoke, but he couldn't understand what he was saying. The only thing he could hear was his own sobbing, the heartbeat of the son of Apollo. Will's arms held him securely against his chest. He clung to Will, for he didn't know how long as he got his sobbing under control. As the tears began to decrease, he could find that he could breathe again. His body calmed down from the panic attack, and Nico felt exhausted. He slumped against Will as he melted back to sleep. Nico's eyes fluttered open. His eyes were crushed from his sobbing the night before. Memories flooded into his mind as he remembered the night before. He had sobbed in front of Nico. He had begged for help. He quickly looked around the infirmary. Will had fallen asleep in the chair next to his bed. He was probably watching Nico because he was worried. Nico felt embarrassed. He had broken down in front of Will, and now Will was losing sleep over him. Nico was just a burden. Worthless, Nico got to his feet. He didn't want to be a burden anymore. He slowly crept towards the door. He poked his head out of the door. The infirmary was empty. So he slipped silently out of the doors. Luckily, it was before dawn, so the camp was still asleep. He headed towards his cabin. He arrived at the door and put the key in, but the door was already unlocked. Right, he thought, Hazel was here. He slipped inside the door as quietly as he could, as to not wake his sister. He closed the door and was encased in darkness. When the Hades cabin had been built, he had not been around to see the construction, as he had begun his failed search for Bianca, finding Hazel instead. The Athena cabin had constructed the cabin, and it was below Nico's expectations. As with all the cabins, they had put in bunk beds. Nico was the only living son of Hades, so he didn't understand why they hadn't just put in a single bed for him. However, it did make it easier when Hazel visited, so she would have a place to sleep. He crept past Hazel, snoozing in her bunk. To Nico's surprise, Raina was in the top bunk, also silently sleeping. He had never really thought about where she slept when she visited. When the Romans had been at camp, they had pitched tents and were self-sufficient. Nico shook these thoughts away as he padded to his bunk, making an effort to be even quieter, as he knew Raina was a light sleeper. There were dressers on either side of each bunk that also functioned as side tables. Nico also had a trunk at the edge of the bed where he kept his clothes. He pulled out a black t-shirt and black jeans, changing from the clothes Will had given him. The cabin was below his expectations, but Nico never stayed for long, so it was fine as a temporary home. He had installed a lock on the door so he could have privacy, but that was one of the only changes he had made to the cabin. He thought about locking himself inside away from everyone, but having Hazel and Raina inside made that a bit difficult. He loved his sister and Raina, but really he just wanted to be alone. He wanted everyone to stop worrying about him. He didn't want to be a burden. He decided to leave the cabin. He grabbed a Stygian iron sword strapping it to his belt. It was a familiar and reassuring presence. With it, no one could hurt him. He slipped out of the cabin again. He circled the cabin and began scaling it. There were little handholds that made climbing the building easier. He pulled himself onto the roof, one of his favorite hideouts. He came up here when he wanted to be alone. If he sat in the right place, he was hidden from view. Someone would have to be directly above him in order to see him. He stretched out, watching the sun rose, waking the rest of the camp. Judging by the position of the sun, it was already 9 o'clock before anyone realized his absence. And boy, did someone realize. The peaceful hum of camp activities was disturbed by a loud slam of the big house door and a scream. "Where is he?" Will's voice sounded through the camp. The cabins weren't that far from the big house, but far enough that he shouldn't have been able to hear him. He was angry. "I'm going to get killed," Nico thought. "I should have thought this through. Nico D'Angelo, when I get my hands on you, I swear." The threat was not said, but he had a feeling of what Will might do to him. Poetry didn't set well for Nico. Nico sat up, peeking around the roof, trying to see what was happening. Will strode angrily to the Hades cabin. He pounded on the door. "Nico D'Angelo, if you don't open this door right now, I will curse you to run for weeks." Nico heard the door open. "What are you doing?" Hazel asked. "Nico's in the infirmary." "Hey!" Nico heard Will enter the cabin and saw him storm back out. His look of anger faded into one of concern. "Well, what's going on?" Hazel asked. "Nico left the infirmary," Will explained. "Again, any idea where he is?" Nico smiled to himself. Hazel did not know about his hideout. They would never find him. He could finally be alone. He settled more comfortably on the roof, arms behind his head. Being alone had its dangers, though. It brought the memories back in full force. Nico had trained him to block out all motions and senses, a self-induced trance that was similar to the death trance. He did this to prevent memories from taking over his mind, causing him to want to hurt himself. Over the next couple of hours, the search raged on for Nico below, who didn't hear it. Later, as evening was slowly approaching, Nico thought he saw a gleam of imperial gold in the sky, but once he snapped himself out of his trance, he was nowhere to be seen. His head starting to show off his senses again. He almost completed it when he heard a voice. "Jason told me I would find you up here." Nico tilted his head to see Will Solace walking across the roof towards him. Nico scowled and sat up, turning away from Will. Will plopped beside him. "So, this is your secret hideout." Nico didn't respond, merely looked to the horizon. "You really hate the infirmary, huh? What does it take to keep you in there?" No response. "You really scared me again today, Nico. You can't just disappear like that. I thought you were injured, or worse. Look, please just stop disappearing on me. On us." Hazel was ready to go down to the underworld to your father. Raina is ready to chain herself to you, so you stop disappearing. Just don't disappear again, okay?" Nico looked to the son of Apollo. He looked sincere, but Nico wasn't going to promise anything. He nodded his head to satisfy Will. Will sighed a sigh of relief. "So why did you run this time? Was it the nightmare again?" Nico wrapped his arm around his, and he's not responding. "Nico, look at me." Reflexively, Nico looked over. He found himself gazing into Will's blue orbs, which were filled with concern. "Please trust me. Let me in. I can help you." Nico sighed, stretching his legs back out. "Yeah, it was the nightmare, but I don't want to talk about it." With that, silence fell between the two boys as they watched the sun slowly sink. Will finally spoke again. "You are going to hate me, but I really need you to come back to the infirmary." Nico started to protest, but Will stopped him. I know, I suck, but I need to do a final check, and if you're okay, you can spend the night in your cabin and be out of the infirmary." Nico didn't answer, which Will took as one. "Great," he stood up, reaching a hand out to Nico. "Let's go." Nico got up without the hand, and then really embarrassed himself. He tripped over himself, almost sending his body falling off the roof. His fall was interrupted by a pair of strong arms encircling him and pulling him back. If Will hadn't been there, Nico would have spent a lot more time in the infirmary. Nico tried to calm his breathing when Will put a hand on his face. Nico flinched back. He didn't want to be touched. He especially didn't want to be touched by a man, an attractive man. He pushed away from Will, feeling disgusted with himself and his sexuality. He clambered off the roof, struggling to find the handhold as memories of Tartarus and his childhood came seeping in. The scent of sulphurous air filled his nostrils, the image of a gay man being beaten in the street, the taste of pomegranate seeds flooded his mouth, the sound of his mother condemning homosexuality, the image of the phlegethon seared across his eyelids, the failed monsters ripping into his flesh. He collapsed as he hit the ground, his vision blurred as he began to have a panic attack. He tried to calm himself, but he couldn't stop the inflow of horrible experiences. Monsters started coming at him, and he swung his sword, warning them to stay back. One of the monsters had a sword, and they began dueling, but Nico was quickly unarmed. He felt a monster grab his shoulder, and he stumbled back since he had no weapon. He heard screaming around him, but couldn't distinguish what was being said. He fell to the ground. He curled in on himself to try and protect himself from the monsters attacking him. Nothing attacked, so his heart rate began to decrease. The memory faded. He looked up to see Will and Jason peering at him. He let out a dignified cough and sat up. He noticed that Jason had a sword. Nico reached for it, but Jason stepped away. No, Nico, are you with us? Can you hear me? Nico nodded and shakily got to his feet. He swayed and Will moved to steady him, but Nico flinched away. Will flinched as well and stepped back. Nico cleared his throat. Why do you have my sword? Nico asked, trying to ignore what had just happened. Well, Jason and Will exchanged a look. You tried to attack us. I managed to disarm you and Will grabbed your shoulder. You tried to attack him, and if I hadn't disarmed you... Jason trailed off. Nico could hear the unspoken words. What happened? Will asked. Was it Tartarus? The word felt ominous in the air. Nico merely nodded, not trusting himself to speak. What happened? What set it off? Jason asked. Nico shook his head. He wasn't saying anything about that in front of Will. Jason's eyes narrowed, and he whispered something in Will's ear. Will nodded and set off toward the big house. Nico walked to his cabin, sat on the steps, trying to regain strength. Jason sat beside him. I won't ask what the memory was, but please, tell me what set off the memory. It will help us help you, Jason said, a stubborn look on his face. What triggered me? I mean, when Will grabbed me, that set it off, Nico whispered, because of the touching thing. Because when I was a kid, my mom said that homosexuals were disgusting, and that place a vision of my mother came. She told me I was disgusting. Nico's eyes filled with tears. Will understood, and his face tightened with anger. She said that to you? She said that to you as a child? She never knew. I didn't know. Nico trailed off. And in the pit, a monster appeared as her. Nico nodded. Thought he had told me about that happening to her once, with our mother. Nico nodded. Yeah, I was there for that. It happened to me too. Was it the same monster you and she fought? Jason asked. Nico shook his head. Something way worse. You aren't disgusting, Nico. That was just the pit messing with your head. Being gay. Stop, Nico shouted, standing. Don't pretend like you know what you're talking about. You're Mr. Perfect, and you have no idea how it feels. Jason stood as well, his hands up in surrender, as if trying to calm Nico. I'm trying to help you, Nico. We all are. Well, Nico got really close to Jason. He angrily put his finger in his face. I swear, if you tell him about this, if you tell him what set me off, you will regret it, he threatened. Jason's eyes flashed with fear. I would never, and even if I did, get out of here, Jason, Nico demanded, stepping back. He knew he scared Jason. The threat had sparked fear in the center of Jupiter's eyes. His electric blue eyes steeled. No, I'm not going anywhere. I want to help you. Nico pushed him back before turning and opening his cabin door. He jumped aside and slammed it shut behind him. He locked it behind him and slid down it. He had started crying, was getting frustrated that he was crying, which caused him to get more upset. He heard Jason calling through the door, but he ignored it. He wrapped his arms around his knees, burying his face into his legs, trying to block everything out. Pretty sure this is where things get pretty good. Can't remember for certain, but Jason's point of view. He continued to pound on the door. After what Will had told him about Nico hurting himself, he didn't want the boy to be left alone, especially in the vulnerable state he was currently in. He remembered breaking the window in order to get him out the other day when he had shadow traveled. He circled the cabin and went to the window, but to his dismay, the window pane had already been replaced. He cursed under his breath before going back to the entrance. Nico, please let me in, he begged. I want to help. Jason pressed his ear against the door. The only thing he had was Nico's sobs. His heart broke for the son of Hades. He was trying to hold up the weight of the world without any help. He pressed his forehead against the door. What was he going to do? What happened? A voice sounded behind him. Raina and Hazel approached the cabin. When Jason had found Nico, he had reported to the girls as well. Will said that he thought he could calm Nico down so that he would go up alone. Raina and Hazel had protested, but Jason sided with Will. He had seen how his presence had calmed the son of Hades the other night. Will asked them all to let him go up alone, as multiple people would probably make matters worse. Raina and Hazel grudgingly agreed and headed to the dining pavilion for dinner. Jason had only stayed in order to get Will and Nico down when needed. "Is he in there?" Hazel asked, indicating the door. "Is he okay?" Jason shook his head. "Listen." The girls approached the door. Nico's sobs could faintly be heard. Hazel put her hand against the door. "Nico, it's me. Can I come in?" She got no response, but while trying to plead with Nico, Raina pulled Jason aside. "What happened? Why is he crying?" Raina whispered. "He had a flashback to Tartarus and his childhood," Jason murmured back. Raina nodded sadly. "I'm surprised that the monsters haven't started to come back until now. Did he tell you what his flashback was about? Some monster he faced in Tartarus that took the form of his mother and condemned him for his sexuality?" Raina questioned. Jason's eyes narrowed. "You knew?" Raina nodded slowly. When I lent him my strength once. I experienced some of his worst memories, like Tartarus and Crotea." Jason could tell Raina was lying about when she had found out, but he didn't press it. "You knew about Crotea," Raina nodded. "Did you tell anyone?" "Not as far as I can tell, but you and I are the only people who know about it." "Let's keep it that way," Jason stated. He looked back at Hazel. She was holding a key in her hand. Jason remembered when he had broken into cabin 13. The door had been locked. Nico must have installed a lock on the door. "Okay, Nico, I'm going to unlock the door and come in now," Hazel informed, putting the key in the lock. Jason approached the door, Raina close behind him. At least they could finally see Nico. "If you unlock that door, I will shadow travel away," Nico threatened through the door. "You're going to fade away if you do that, Nico," Raina admonished. "I don't care. I will do it." "Don't come in here. I want to be alone." "Nico, please," Hazel pleaded with her brother, removing the key. "Leave me alone," he sobbed. His sobs became quieter as he moved further into the cabin. Will's point of view. Will was having a bad day. First, he had woken up to find his patient missing. Second, he spent the day searching for said patient, not knowing if Nico was injured or worse, dead. Third, his search for Nico was interrupted by a bad archery injury that required his expertise. Needless to say, when Jason told him to leave Nico to him and get his own medical supplies, Will was a little pissed off. He stormed down to the infirmary. He grabbed a sedative to relax Nico and some other medical equipment, grabbed a stethoscope around his neck, and grabbed his medical bag. He jogged back to Nico's cabin. Outside, Raina, Hazel, and Jason were knocking on the door, speaking through it. Uh-oh. Nico had barricaded himself in the cabin. Will cursed, and Jason locked eyes with him. "What did you say?" Will asked in a scary, calm voice. Jason looked stressed and worried. "We were just talking, and he stormed into his cabin and locked the door. And if I used the key, threatened to shadow travel away," Hazel supplied. What were you talking about, Jason? "I need to know what triggered him." Jason looked terrified. "I can't tell you. It's Nico's business, and he would kill me if he knew I told you." "I don't care, Jason. If you don't tell me, it could kill Nico." The last two words rang out. "If he shadow jumps again, that's what's going to happen. So why did he lock himself inside?" "Well, I can't. I made a promise. And I made a promise to heal Nico, and you are making that difficult," Will said forcefully. Jason was rendered speechless. "Fine, don't tell me. Just get out of here. Nico is obviously done talking to you, but maybe he will talk to me." "What makes you think he's going to talk to you?" Raina asked. Will turned to face her. "He barely knows you, and you barely know him. He doesn't trust you, but he trusts us, his family, his friends. That's what puts me in the best position to talk to him," Will asserted. "I don't have any expectations of him, any judgment. I don't know everything about him, which is probably what he wants. Judgment's expectation. I have no expectations of my brother," Hazel defended. "Of course you do. You just don't realize it," Will said. "I know you care about him and love him, but let me help. I care about him too. Let me help him. I can heal him physically. I can help calm him down. Come on, guys. Let Will try. He's right. He won't talk to any of us. Maybe Will make some progress," Jason said. Hazel considered Will before handing him her key. "Help him, please. I want to know that he's okay." Will nodded, wrapping his hand around the key. Hazel and Jason led Raina away, leaving Will alone on the cabin steps. He turned towards the door. He dropped his bag on the door and put his hand on the door. "Nico," he said, "I know you can hear me. Please open up. I'm not going to question you or judge you. Please, I just want to help. I just want to know that you are okay." His head leaned against the door. The faint sobs started to lessen as if listening to Will's words. He continued. "Hazel gave me her key, but I'm not going to use it. Just let me in whenever you are ready. I can help." Eventually, after night had fallen, Will heard tentative footsteps. He heard the unlocking of the front door. The footsteps faded away. Will smiled a small smile of victory before bending down to grab his bag. He grabbed the handle and slowly turned it. He pushed the door open and walked into the dark cabin. Will could barely see the outline of Nico against his back covers. He shut the door behind him. He snapped his finger, and Greek fire contained in torches flared up around the room. Nico's face lit up with greenish glow. He flinched from the light and tried to bury himself in his covers. Will caught a glimpse of his face. It was streaked with tears, and he had bags under his eyes. He looked unnaturally pale, and his skin looked gaunt as a result to his refusal to eat. Will slowly walked over to where the son of Hades was buried in the covers. He knelt down and pulled the covers back. Nico's face was in the pillows. Will tentatively put his hand on Nico's back. Nico flinched away, but Will did not move his hand. Eventually, Nico turned his face from out of the pillow. He carefully sat up. Will didn't move, not wanting to frighten the boy. Will looked at the boy up and down. That's when he saw the blood. Moving slowly, he reached out for Nico's arm. He grabbed it and leaned down, looking at the fresh cuts. Nico tried to pull away, but Will's grip was firm. He looked back into Nico's eyes, letting his eyes ask a question. Nico looked down before bringing up his other arm. Will held his hand out, and Nico dropped a razor blade into it. With a sigh, Will took the blade and put it in his bag. He grabbed a towel and wiped the blood away from Nico's arm. There weren't that many cuts, but it was still a relapse. Will carefully wrapped a bandage around the cuts, staunching the bleeding. He let Nico's arm go and took his hands. Will's eyes shut as he tried to feel how much residual darkness was in the son of Hades from his shadow traveling. He almost jumped at the amount Nico had. He began concentrating on every piece of healing magic he knew, muttering an ancient Greek healing spell under his breath. He heard Nico gasp as his hands lit up. He could see the light against his eyelids. He kept his focus as he coaxed the darkness out of Nico into his own hands. Once he could feel Nico's body empty of the darkness, he released his hands. Will then brought his own hands together as if crushing the darkness. The darkness evaporated, overpowered by the sunlight from within Will. Will felt a wave of fatigue. Using his healing powers really taxed him. He opened his eyes. Nico D'Angelo looked like a weight had been lifted off. Will brought his hand up, brushing the hair out of the son of Hades' eyes. Nico flinched back harshly. He started pushing away from Will. Will had enough strength to hold him back, but not for long. Nico flinched and fought harder. He managed to keep Nico in place as he grabbed the seductive. He took it and plunged it into Nico's arm. Nico gasped. No. Will. He started falling back into Will's chest. Will watched as Nico's eyes relaxed as the seductive took effect. Nico's eyes held a betrayed look as he gained eye contact with Will. Will held him as he sunk out of consciousness. His eyes slid shut and Will relaxed. He let Nico's head fall back onto his shoulder. He slowly slid Nico off him and back into his bed. He grabbed his bag and started taking supplies out. He removed Nico's shirt. All his injuries were healing, though Nico still needed some unicorn drought and ambrosia, which he wouldn't be able to take until he had food. He turned Nico over to look at his back. Same story. He took out his stethoscope and started listening to Nico breathe. It was steady. Will looked at Nico's werewolf claw marks. They were healing quite well with the stitches. To prevent them from getting tampered with, Will wrapped a clean white bandage around Nico's arm. He secured it and looked at Nico's wrist. The cuts had bled through the bandage. Will shook his head sadly as he removed the bandage. He focused on his hand and it started glowing again. He ran his hand over the cuts without touching the skin. His energy had been depleted, so he wasn't able to fully heal the cuts, but he had at least stopped the bleeding. He let Nico's arms fall. He managed to pull the covers over Nico before he stumbled back, collapsing into an empty bunk and passing out. This is a long video, and my mouth is getting really dry. Water time. Will's point of view. Will groaned as he woke up. He felt groggy, nursing a huge headache. He checked his watch. It was noon. What? He checked again. It was noon the following day. Apparently, healing Nico had exhausted him. He walked over to the pillow, opening the curtains, allowing sunlight to spill into the room. He heard Nico groan and bury himself deeper into the covers. Will chuckled to himself and turned towards the son of Hades. Close the curtains, Hazel, Nico muttered into his pillow. Looking around the room, Will didn't see Hazel. He wondered where she had slept. As lovely as your sister is, I am not her, Will said. Nico froze in his bed for a moment before groaning. He sat up, looking at Will. Why are you in my cabin, Solace? Before Will could answer, Nico's eyes widened. Wait a minute, you drugged me, Nico exclaimed. He slid off his bunk, moving away from Will. I had to check you over, and I thought you were going to try to run again, Will said, crossing his arms over his chest. And after seeing that you hurt yourself last night, I stayed here to make sure you didn't do anything else. Nico scowled, crouching down to his trunk. He started pulling clothes out. I don't need a babysitter. I'm not a child. Considering your life might be on the line, you need someone watching you. Self-harm can be a very dangerous... Nico slammed the trunk closed, cutting off Will. I don't want to hear it. You can't just ignore it. It's not healthy and you need help. I'm not talking about this with you. I'm fine, so you can leave. Will wasn't giving up that easily. Fine, I'll go, but you're coming with me. Nico furrowed his eyebrows. I don't need a babysitter. I can go about my daily life without killing myself. Will sucked in her breath about how blunt Nico was about his self-harm and suicidal thoughts. I wasn't trying to babysit you. We are going to get lunch. Nico scowled. Will scowled back. You need to eat food. Besides, your sister and friends will eventually start to wonder where you are. Nico rolled his eyes but ducked into the bathroom to change. Will smiled, realizing his victory. He grabbed his medical bag and swung it onto his shoulder. He finger-brushed his hair and prayed that his breath didn't reek. Nico came out of the bathroom in his usual black attire. He was also wearing a hoodie, even though it wasn't hot out. Had to hide his scar somehow. Will sighed as he pushed open the door to the Hades cabin. He walked out into the sunlight, happy to get some fresh air, making sure Nico was following him. He set off towards the dining pavilion. He passed by Connor Stoll, who was tied with some vines as he tried to steal a demeanor girl's wallet. Louie Ellen was playing with her pet piglets that Will really hoped weren't campers. Pegasus was dragging around a Hephaestus kid, just another normal day at camp. They arrived at the dining pavilion. Nico sat at his table, trying to blend in with the shadows. Before Will could even choose a seat, he was beckoned to the head table by Chiron. Good afternoon, Solace. We needed you in the infirmary last night. Yes, I know, I'm sorry. I was with Nico and... Yes, in his cabin. As you know, it's against camp rules for two campers who don't have the same parent to be alone in a cabin. Cabin. Oh, I was healing him and watching him over in the night. Nothing like that happened. Will could feel the heat rising off his face. Okay, Mr. Solace, if you need to watch over him, make sure you run it by me first. Will sulked off, eventually reaching the Hades table. While he was gone, Raina, Hazel, and Jason had sat down at the table. The wooden imps had already come by and served lunch. Nico was pushing the food around on his plate. The trio at the table were peppering Nico with questions about why he wouldn't talk to them last night. Nico looked uncomfortable, so Will sat next to him, hoping to stop their flow of questions. Sorry that I locked the door last night, Hazel. Will interrupted the conversation as he sat down. I realized that this morning, and the fact that I still had the key, he slid this across the table. Where did you sleep? Hazel waved off his concern. Me, Raina, and Frank slept in Jason's cabin. There are a lot of extra bunks. Jason focused on Will. Since Nico won't talk to us, can you tell us what happened last night? He doesn't speak for me, Nico said. Well, it's not like you're doing much speaking, Raina pointed out. Or eating. Aren't you hungry? Nico shook his head, pushing the plate away. Will frowned. You can't just not eat, Nico. You haven't eaten in days and your body needs the nutrition. You aren't my mother, Nico said. No, but I'm your doctor, and I am saying you need to eat. Doctor's orders, Will asserted. Shut up with that, Nico snapped. You aren't a real doctor, just some kid of Apollo with magic fingers. Stop telling me what to do. I will tell you what to do, for as long as you continue to do things detrimental to your health. You don't need to care. You don't seem to care enough to take care of yourself, so I have to do it. Will shot back. The two were glaring daggers at each other. A storm was brewing in the sun of Hades. I don't care. I don't want you to care. I don't want your help. I hate you and your stupid doctoring of me. You are a horrible healer. I can't save anyone. You act like you completely understand me, but you don't. You can't fix me or anyone else. So just leave me alone. The words hung in the air as silence fell over the table. The full impact of the words hit Will. His face hardened as he tried not to let his hurt show. Understood. I'll just leave. Take my useless healing skills somewhere else. As he spoke, he pushed himself away from the table and stood. He started to walk away, but had one more thing to say. With a shaking finger, he bent down so he was right in Nico's face, so only the son of Hades would hear him. I could have let you die. I could have let you fade away. I could have let you make those scars deeper, but I didn't. I stopped you because I cared. You push everyone who cares away. Maybe that's why you feel so alone. He let his hand drop and stood back up. Will calmly walked out of the pavilion, trying not to let his anger show. He noticed other campers watching the action at the Hades table with bated breath. Will nodded curtly at them, and they went back to their meals. He quickened his pace and eventually was clear of the pavilion. And the impact of Nico's words hit him. He knew that Nico had said those things because he was upset. But what if that was how he truly felt? Did he really think Nico was a terrible healer and that he couldn't fix anything? That hit a sore spot for Will. Will was unbelievably insecure about his abilities. Too many people had been lost under Will's watch. Too many people he hadn't been able to save. While all of his siblings and Chiron had countlessly told him that it wasn't his fault, that the people were beyond help, the guilt was still there for Will. He blamed himself for their deaths. Nico was right. He couldn't save anyone because of his incompetence. Great people had died. He hadn't noticed which direction he was going until which direction he was walking during his escape from the pavilion. He found himself in the woods. He decided to climb a tree to wait out all the guilt crashing down around him. He pulled himself up and rested with his back against the trunk. Feet sprawled across the branch. He took deep breaths, and as he tried to get his thoughts under control, he had to try to assure himself that it wasn't his fault. His fault. Oh, his fault. Tears worsened as he started sobbing into his hands, praying that those he had lost would forgive him for failing to save them. Nico watched as Will walked. Nico's point of view. Nico watched as Will walked out of the dining pavilion. He felt a twinge of guilt for what he had said. He hadn't meant a word of it, but he was so frustrated with Will for trying to shield and mother him. He had only said those things to get the boy to leave him alone, and it worked. And Nico was upset that it worked, and then he was mad that he was upset. Nico just wanted to be alone by himself. He had enjoyed Will's presence, but he couldn't let the son of Hades get close. He didn't want to catch feelings. He needed to push Will away. In fact, Nico needed to push everyone away. They would all end up leaving or hurting him anyways. Nico didn't deserve any of these people. They were too good, too pure for him. They were better off without him. They would be better off if he was dead. Nico told himself that once he found Leo wherever he was, he'd bring him back to Camp Half-Blood. Leo would take his place and no one would notice that the son of Hades had disappeared. As he made that plan in his head, he finally noticed what was going on around him. His thoughts were broken through by Hazel calmly admonishing him. Was that Nico? Are you even listening to me? Will saved your life and you repay him by saying that? What's gotten into you? Nico wouldn't meet her eyes and he felt her staring into him. He merely shrugged his shoulders. I don't like being told what to do. Well, that is no reason to treat Will like that. He cares about you and you completely turned him away. I prefer to be alone. Nico? No, I said what I said, and I can't take it back. Does someone want to go sword training with me, or do I have to do it? Or do I have to go by myself? Nico asked. Jason exchanged a look with Raina and spoke in a wary voice, as if handling a bomb about to go off. Nico, I know you want to, but Will was talking about how you were still healing. I mean, he is your healer and knows what is best for you. I think you should just rest. Jason started, but Nico interrupted. Okay, well, that answers my question. If you guys need me, I'll be in the arena. Nico got up and walked away from the table, turning his back on the small group of friends. He heard footsteps behind him and glanced back to see Raina hurrying after him. Great, he thought. It's going to be harder than I thought to push them all away. He kept walking, increasing his pace to try and get away from Raina, but she caught up easily. Mind if I join you? She asked. Yes. Good. And she kept walking with him. Did Jason send you? Nico asked venomously. First off, Grace doesn't send me anywhere. I follow my own rules. Secondly, no, I just want to spend time with you. Are you going to lecture me about Will? Because if you are, I'm really not in the mood and you can walk away now. No. I'm not here to lecture you. Although what you said was stupid, it's your decision. What you say to people, Raina said matter-of-factly. But I did want to talk about last night. What happened? He and Raina stopped. They had arrived at the arena, which was now empty. I don't really want to talk about it. Yes, I got that much, Raina finished as she turned to look Nico in the eyes, but I do want to talk about it. I didn't come all this way to see you for 5 minutes and have you not speak the whole time. I had to call in favor from Lord Pegasus himself in order to get back to camp as fast as I could when you were fading away. You owe me. So talk. Nico just realized that he didn't have a sword. I'm not going to deflect, but I really don't know where my sword is. Raina waved his concern away. Jason took it last night when you almost attacked Will. What was that about? Nico felt a twinge of guilt when she mentioned his name. He almost decapitated him last night, and he'd ripped his heart out this afternoon. Nico felt terrible for hurting the son of Apollo. He cared about Will, which annoyed him. I'm waiting, Raina reminded. Nico realized that she was not about to back down. He walked over to one of the benches in the arena and plopped down. I had a nightmare about Tartarus, and that's why I ran from the infirmary, Nico said. Is that why you tried to attack Will and Jason too? Raina asked. Nico nodded. I was trapped in a memory. I thought I was back there and they were trying to hurt me. Raina considered him. You were up there almost a day, though. Were you trapped in the memory all day? No, well, something set off my memory. Nico tried not to say that Will had been the cause, but Raina had noticed his blunder. Her eyes narrowed. He touched. What What did he do that set it off? She asked. He touched me, Nico said. Her eyes widened. Like, inappropriately? Nico rushed to fix his words. No, 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 no. Nothing like that. He paused for a moment. He didn't do anything wrong. He just caught me when I almost fell off the roof. I mean, I know you don't like to be touched, but why did that set off? Because of my sexuality, Nico felt his face turn bright red. Because of your... Oh, do you like him? His face reddened even more. What? No! Him touching me just triggered a memory from Tartarus of my mother and father, and Percy calling me disgusting, Nico admitted. He didn't expect to get out that much information, but it was already done. Raina was considering him carefully. You saw them down there? Godly interference, not good, he supplied, not wanting to say more. Raina picked up on this and moved past it. There's nothing disgusting or wrong about being dumped. Nico held up his hands to stop her words. I come from a time where those kinds of people were locked in insane asylums. That's what I grew up learning. That's what I was socialized to believe. Okay, but things have changed in the 21st century, Raina reminded. People have become a lot more accepting. More accepting doesn't mean totally accepting, Nico pointed out. Sure, but it's a lot better than the 1940s. Nico considered this. But maybe if I had stayed in that time, I wouldn't have turned out, you know. Raina looked at him. It's not about turning out one way or another. It's a part of who you are. You have to accept it. If you don't, you're going to end up hating yourself. Like I don't already. I did accept it. I told Percy that Raina laughed. You haven't accepted it. You won't even say the word, and anytime anyone tries to mention it, you get visibly uncomfortable. Whatever, even if I do accept myself, not everyone will. Everyone will accept it that matters, Raina said. Jason knows and he remains loyal to you. Percy knows and he still treats you like any one of his friends. Okay, but take Hazel. She was born in a different time period like me. She wouldn't understand. Hazel loves you so much, Nico. Even if she didn't understand, which I'm sure she does, she would still love and support you no matter what. Frank, Nico started, but Raina was on a roll. Frank Zhang doesn't have a hate bone in his body. He is kind and unquestionably loyal. That's one reason that I appointed him as praetor. Nico stood and started pacing. I just feel so out of place here, in this time, in this camp. You do belong in this camp, she started, but Nico wasn't done. I don't, though. My father doesn't belong on Olympus, and I don't belong at camp. It's the curse of being associated with the dead. I get along better with the dead than I do with the living, and the dead only respect me because they fear me. I am so out of place in this century. Everything feels unfamiliar and strange. Have you talked with Hazel about this? This is more her area of expertise, Raina asked. Nico shrugged. I mean, a little bit. But our situations are kind of different. She was dead. I got locked away for years, he said. I don't know. I just feel out of place. Raina stood. She put her hand on his shoulder. Well, you always have a place with me. If you ever get sick of campfire songs, you can always come back to Camp Chimpleburg. I have a black toga with your name all over it. Nico snorted. If I never have to wear that toga again, it would be too soon. Raina walked over to the weapons stand. I personally like the toga. Very comfortable. Nico picked the sword up from the rack. It wasn't as well balanced as his Stygian iron sword, but it would do. You also live in your armor, so anything is more comfortable than that. Raina looked down at her gold armor. What's wrong with my armor? Nico struck at Raina. She stopped his sword with her own. Makes you move more slowly. Before he realized it, she was standing over him, her sword at his throat, only a sword preventing hers from decapitating him. If it hadn't been for his reflexes, he would have been cut in half. I think I moved quickly enough, she goaded. She extended a hand and helped him up. With that, they began training, the sounds of clashing swords filling the arena. Time for chapter 14. Nico's point of view. It was dinner time when Nico collapsed on his bed. He and Raina had spared in the arena for about 3 hours. Then they had tried to just about every camp activity possible. Although Nico was not hot, sweaty, and bruised, he had never felt better. Although Nico was now hot, sweaty, and bruised, he had never felt better. It felt so good to not be cooped up all day. He felt great putting his energy into training. He hadn't trained in such a long time that his ability had started to fade away. He hated to admit that Raina had gone easier on them than normal. He also hated to admit that Will was right. He still wasn't back to full strength. At one point, he felt the stitches on his werewolf lacerations break, but after what happened with Will, he didn't think he could face Will again. He just wrapped the bandage tighter, praying the blood wouldn't show. Horrible healer. Those words he had yelled at Will came flooding back into his head as he thought about the son of Apollo. He had seen Will's heartbreak right in front of him. Nico had known Will's insecurities and preyed on them. Will was right. Nico knew exactly how to push people away. Anxiety overcame him as he thought about the son of Apollo. He felt terrible for what he had said. Guilt hit him with a strong pang. Will wasn't horrible. Nico was. He hurt everyone around him, even when he wasn't trying to. He hurt those he cared about. That's why he pushed people away, to try and protect them, because people around him get hurt. They get killed. The conch horn sounded. It was dinner time. Another pang of guilt and anxiety went through him at the thought of seeing Will. He couldn't face him. He couldn't look into his hurt blue orbs again, seeing the damage he had caused with just his words. Damage, so much damage. He was a force of destruction, causing death and pain in his wake. Pain. He deserved to feel pain. He deserved to feel pain, the pain that he had caused others. Before realizing what he was doing, he grabbed a razor blade from his bedside table. Memories flooded into his head as he remembered some of the times he had used it. He recalled the blood trickling down his legs, the red seeping his arms. He gripped the razor blade so hard that it cut into his hand. He looked down, surprised to see blood running down his hand. It reminded him of the phlegethon, how it curled around the banks of Tartarus, how it flowed. He recalled the firewater searing down his throat, bringing the only relief in all of Tartarus. Then he remembered all the monsters he had fought along the banks of the river. He started shaking as a panic attack threatened to take over. He methodically started raising the blade and running it across the skin on his thighs. The pain brought him back to reality. He continued etching into his skin until all traces of the memory and the panic attack faded away. He stopped and looked at what he had done. Oh no, he thought. Will had given him a second chance to be clean, and he had done this. He had let Will down again. Blood was spilling onto his sheets. He panicked. If Will was to see this, he couldn't let Will see it. He wouldn't let anyone see this. He started to mop up his mutilated legs with the already blood-stained sheets. He wiped the razor blade to erase any evidence and put it on his side table. He was about to pull the sheets off his bed when he heard a tentative knock at his door. He paused and dove under the covers, hoping whoever was knocking would go away. His hope was quashed as his door creaked open, his eyes shut, pretending to be asleep. Nico? Will's voice rang out into the room. He sighed when he saw the boy sleeping. He slowly backed out of the room. Nico heard the door click and Will's footsteps receding. His eyes flew open and he threw the covers off. Blood was still flowing. He stood to go to the bathroom. He almost collapsed. He guessed that he had cut deeper than he meant to. He caught his breath. When he was recovered, he pulled the sheets off his bed and wobbled to the bathroom. He turned on the shower and ran the bath. When the water was hot and the tub filled, Nico dropped the gray sheets in the bath with lots of soap to soak the sheet. He undressed and slipped into the shower. Carefully, he peeled off his bandage. The stitches were broken, the gashes open, and a lot of blood came out. He realized it was a bad idea, but he ran his arm under the water. He hissed at the pain and almost passed out. He started to see black spots, but secured himself by sitting. He washed the blood off of his body and just sat under the hot water for a while, thinking about what could go wrong next. Nico emerged from the bathroom about an hour later. It had taken a good half an hour for the blood to stop gushing. Afterward, Nico had bandaged his thighs and arm. He pulled on a long-sleeved shirt and some comfortable black pants. He had decided that he didn't want to sleep, so to keep himself awake, he made the decision to spend the night on the roof in the chilly night air. He stuffed pillows under his covers so when Hazel and Raina came back, they wouldn't notice his absence. He grabbed the sheets out of the bath and shoved that under his covers. He peered out of the cabin to make sure he wouldn't get caught. When the coast was clear, he ran to the side of the cabin and used the handholds to get to the roof. He then settled into his hidden spot and watched the sun slowly go down. After a while, he heard songs being sung around the campfire. He sighed, knowing he really would never be a part of the camp. He fell into his trance. His thoughts were disturbed by the rising of the sun. It was already the next morning. He had stayed deep in thought all night. His limbs were stiff from being in the same position all night, the cold air seeping into his bones. He stretched and the sun started to warm him up. He climbed down the roof and hit the ground. He walked back into his cabin. He went into the bathroom and glanced at himself in the mirror. There were bags under his eyes that he prayed nobody would notice. He looked paler than usual, probably due to the fact that he had lost a lot of blood the night before and had refused to eat too. His hair was starting to fall over his eyes, and he brushed it out of them. He brushed his teeth, pulled on a new set of clothes, and set out to breakfast. He knew that if he didn't emerge from his cabin sooner or later, Will would march down to it, breaking the door open. He walked into the dining pavilion. He saw Will Solace glance at him, then look back to his plate, the back of his neck turning red. Nico could tell that he had really hurt the son of Apollo. Though he hadn't wanted to, Nico needed to push Will away. He sat down at the table, and a piece of toast appeared on the plate before him. Almost immediately, Jason, Hazel, and Percy swarmed his table. "Is that all you're eating? You should eat more. How much did you sleep last night? When I came in, you were asleep, and when I left, you were still asleep. Did you sleep all night?" Nico didn't answer any of the questions directly. He muttered a small, "I'm fine." They all looked at each other and back at Nico. "Are you sure?" Jason asked wearily. Nico nodded and, with his hand, brushed the hair out of his eyes. This movement caused Jason to grab his wrist. Nico flinched, but Jason held on. He pulled his sleeve back, exposing his arms. "Is there blood on your bandage? Did your stitches break?" At this, Will's head cocked as if trying to hear the conversation. "I'm fine, Grace," Nico growled, snatching his arm away. "It's nothing." Jason looked unconvinced. He sat down beside Nico and grabbed his arm away. He began unwrapping the bandage. Nico tried to pull away, but Percy and Jason held him in place. There was a lot of dry blood on the bandage. "This doesn't look like nothing," Percy said, seeing how soaked the bandage was. Nico started shaking. He didn't want Percy and Jason both touching him. He yanked his arm away and stumbled off of the bench. "Leave me alone!" He pulled his hood up and tried to walk away. Percy grabbed his arm. This pushed Nico over the edge. He tried to yank his arm, but Percy had a defiant look in his eyes. "No, you need to go see Will now. You reopened the stitches, and you don't want them to get infected." Nico kept trying to pull away, but Percy held him firm. He was about to go into panic mode when a hand on his shoulder stopped him. "Will, let's all just calm down now." "Nico, what seems to be the problem?" Will's hand on his shoulder seemed to melt away his anger. Will had that effect. Nico yanked his arm from Percy's grip and shrugged off Will's hand. "Nothing's wrong. I'm fine." Not fine. His stitches broke. Look." Percy brought his arm out. Nico yanked it back, glaring at Percy. "Touch me one more time, Jackson, and I swear." But his threat was interrupted by the son of Apollo. "Come on, Nico, let's go to the infirmary so I can check you out, and then you can go." With that, Nico was dragged into the infirmary. He was shoved on a bed. Nico asked him to remove his hoodie. Nico complied. Nico took in all the bandages lining his arms. There was a bandage from the other day when Will had stitched up his claw marks, but now there were bandages along his forearms as well. Will's eyes widened, but he said nothing. He unwrapped the bandage on his upper arm first. He considered the stitches that were only partially broken. After shooting a numbing agent into his skin, Will started to restitch his arm. While Will worked, Nico considered him. He didn't say a word, so Nico assumed that Will was still hurt. He looked closely at the son of Apollo, noticing that his bright eyes were bloodshot, as if he had been crying. Nico looked away. His gaze landed on Will's hands, quickly sewing it back. Something around Will's wrist caught Nico's attention. Oh no. There were bracelets around the healer's wrist, but Nico could see the red marks underneath them. Nico had tried to push Will away, but he hadn't meant to cause the son of Apollo to hurt himself. He opened his mouth to apologize, but was interrupted by Will. "I am going to wrap a new bandage around these lacerations. They should be healed in the next couple of days. Don't be an idiot and try to train again. Today, I don't want to have to fix these stitches again." He wrapped a clean bandage around his bicep. "Well," Nico started, but Will already turned away. "As for your other injuries," Nico winced at the disappointment in Will's voice. It was tangible. He turned back to Nico, throwing him something. Nico caught it. "Here's some ambrosia to heal it up." "Can I have some more bandages?" Nico asked, face reddening, to hide them. Will refused to meet Nico's eyes, but Nico saw his eyes still up. "You should have thought of that before you hurt yourself. They should heal relatively quickly with the ambrosia, but you have to eat to make sure you don't burn yourself up." Will, Nico opened his mouth to thank his healer, but Will had already turned away, messing with some supplies. "You may leave." With that, Nico was dismissed from the infirmary. Usually the son of Apollo would keep him in there as long as possible, even for something as small as a paper cut. Now he was as eager as possible to be away from Nico. He sighed as he walked out of the big house. Perhaps it was for the best. It was after dinner on the following day. The rest of the day after being released from Will's care, he had been relatively uneventful. full. He had eaten a little food in order to take the ambrosia, but he had again foregone sleeping, not wanting to return to his nightmares. He had also not wanted to scream himself awake, and saw subsequently worry Hazel and Raina. The girls and Frank had left at noon today, as the Romans required their praetors, but Raina had left. Before Raina had left, she had made Nico promise to contact her if he needed anything or needed to talk to someone. It made Nico think she knew about his self-harm, but surely Will would have kept that to himself, right? Hazel and Raina had also questioned Will to make sure Nico was okay. Will had reassured them, but still had refused to talk to Nico himself. It hurt Nico, but he understood. He knew the impact his words had had. The rest of the day had passed quickly. He had trained for a little while in the arena with Jason. At dinner, Nico had managed a few bites, but even that had made him feel sick. Unfortunately, Nico's sleepless nights were getting to him. He had been falling asleep at dinner. He had waved off Jason's and Percy's invitation to the nightly bonfire, instead opting to isolate himself in his cabin. Once he had arrived at cabin 13, he walked inside, too tired to even remember to lock the door behind him. He removed his pants, leaving him in his boxers so he could be more comfortable. He collapsed into his bed, setting comfortably against his pillows. Before he could realize that was a bad idea, sleep had already had a hold on him. Warning, this is where the intense self-harm starts. It will be over when the chapter is over. A scream ripped from his throat, waking him up. He shot straight up, looking around rapidly. Images of Tartarus burned against his eyelids. With a shaking hand, he reached for his razor in his drawer, but he couldn't find it. He put his feet on the floor, stumbling to his bathroom. He tripped over the rug in the bathroom, catching himself on the sink. He looked at himself in the mirror. He stared for too long. His image began repeating the words he had heard in the nightmare. Worthless, useless, disgusting, kill yourself. He took his shaking hands and smashed the mirror, disturbing the image. It shattered, glass raining down on the floor. He felt the shards biting into him. He fell to his knees, sobbing, almost mechanically. Nico grabbed a huge shard of shattered glass and dragged it down his thigh. Satisfaction overtook him as he watched the blood spill from his veins. The sting held off some memories from Tartarus, gripping the shard more tightly. He ran the glass across his other thigh, washing the whiteness of his skin with red. He made short work of his legs before moving to his arms, continuing to spill blood onto his floor. His vision went blurry before he felt himself fall against the mere shards strewn across the floor. A knock on his door shook Nico out of his semi-conscious state. He sat up quickly, fear overtaking his being. The dizziness was worse than the fear, and he felt himself swimming out of consciousness. Nico, come on, we're going to train before breakfast. Are you coming? Jason's voice queried. Nico tried to speak, but no words came out. He leaned heavily against the sink to keep himself grounded, but the lightheadedness was overwhelming. Nico, can I come in? The door started opening. No. The word ripped from his throat. Jason couldn't see him like this. He would be disgusted. He would report him to Will. I need a minute. It was too late. Nico's fatigue last night had caused him to forget to lock the door. Jason walked into the cabin. Through his blurred vision, he saw Jason score the main room, his eyebrows fraying when he did not see Nico. Nico attempted to close the bathroom door before Jason saw the mess he had made, but his movement merely alerted Jason to his location. Nico watched Jason's face fall from confusion to horror. Nico! He screamed as he launched into the bathroom. Tears began streaming down Nico's face. No, please go! Shit, Nico, what did you do? Jason pulled the shard from his hands and began frantically looking for a towel. Shit, you're bleeding really, really bad. You need Will. Nico grabbed Jason's wrist. No, he pleaded. Please don't tell Will. He'll hate me, promise. You won't tell. Please, please. His hand fell, leaving a bloodstain on Jason's wrist. Jason looked helpless. Nico, I have to tell him. You are really hurt. Please, he whimpered. Jason didn't answer. He grabbed a towel, ran it under the water, and began mopping up Nico's thighs. Nico hissed at the pain and started to see black spots. Nico! Nico! Jason's voice started to fade. Nico started to fall back to the ground. No, he thought, I can't pass out. Will can't see me like this. He had to get away. Before he hit the ground, he felt Jason's arms wrap around him. The last thing he saw was fear emitting from the sun of Jupiter's eyes. Then he knew more. Then he knew no more. That was intense. We still have one more chapter to go, but one more thing before we continue. I just want to say when it says, kill yourself, don't take that seriously. Don't use that into your account. I hope when I read it, it didn't make it sound like that. I just realized that I didn't want to stop reading, but I thought I'd mention it after. Anyway, final chapter for today. There's 10 other chapters in this. Anyway, Chapter 15. Will's point of view. Nico had really hurt him. His words had targeted one of his biggest insecurities. Will had spent the night crying, barely getting any sleep. He had been concerned that Nico had broken his stitches and that new scars lined his skin, but the hurt was still very much present. As much as Nico had hurt him, however, Will still fiercely cared for the boy. With thoughts of Nico, Will got out of bed and walked outside his cabin. The camp was still quiet, with most campers still sleeping, as breakfast wouldn't be served for at least another hour. Will sat down on the golden steps of Cabin 7. Considering the camp, it was peaceful, the sun just barely rising in the distance. The peace lasted very shortly, as it was disturbed by Jason Grace running up to him. The first thing Will noticed, his doctor side coming out, was blood on Jason's arms and the front of his shirt. The sun in Jupiter's eyes were flashing with fear. Will stood up, running to meet Jason. Where did that blood come from? Jason, he asked in horror, trying to see if there was any visible cuts on the demigod. Hades' cabin. Nico, he said breathlessly. No, he said quietly. Will knew what had happened. He cursed under his breath. He should have kept better surveillance under the sun of Hades. He turned back to his cabin, bursting inside, lunging for his bunk. He hurriedly grabbed his medical bag, stuffing some other medical supplies he had lying around. He returned back to Jason, and the two boys sprinted to the Hades cabin. And they arrived within seconds. Jason wrenched open the door. Will followed closely behind him. He quickly surveyed the cabin for the son of Hades, but his eyes immediately found him. He gasped at the bloody scene in the bathroom. There was broken glass from the mirror strewn around the floor. Scattered among the shards were small puddles of blood. Will felt fear go through him. That much blood shouldn't have been outside anyone's body. In the middle of the wreckage lay Nico D'Angelo. His eyes were closed, his eyelids bruised. His usually olive skin was deathly pale. Will's eyes went to Nico's wrists. His suspicion was confirmed. Nico had cut himself. His arms were caked in blood, but there was too much blood to just come from his arms. Will's eyes searched down Nico's body. On his thighs, blood was gushing from the wounds. He looked dead. Looking at all the blood, Will was sure he was dead. Will fell to his knees, ignoring the broken mirror carving into his own skin. His hand slipping on the blood coming from Nico's wrist. Will searched for a pulse. His own hand was shaking, so he had to steady himself. He stopped breathing, trying to feel a pulse. There, he found a slow and steady pulse, but a pulse nonetheless. Will barked a laugh of relief. Nico was still alive. He ordered Jason to get a clean towel. Jason handed this to him as he fished an antiseptic out of his bag. He applied the antiseptic to the towel and began mopping up the dried blood. As he cleaned, jagged cuts and gashes began appearing. Instead of the methodological and precise slits that usually lined his wrists and thighs, Nico had mutilated his skin with shards of the mirror. He must have been truly desperate. Nico's thighs were still leaking blood, as Nico had cut deeply into himself. Will applied pressure to the gashes as he looked up at Jason. He squeaked out. He cleared his throat and tried again. I'm pretty sure I know the answer, but I have to ask, did he do this to himself? Tears came to Jason's eyes. I walked on him doing it, and I had to pull the shard of glass from his hand. He made me promise not to tell you or anyone, but I had to. He wouldn't stop bleeding, and I didn't know what to do. Will nodded. You did the right thing, coming to me. It doesn't matter if you broke a promise. This is a matter of life and death. Is he going to die? Jason asked. I don't know, Will confessed. He assessed his patient. He pulled the thermos of emergency unicorn down his bag. He poured the liquid down Nico's throat, who reflexively swallowed the potion. It wasn't enough, but it would start his healing process. The most pressing concern was the blood. The bleeding had almost stopped, but Nico had lost a dangerous amount of blood. Will extracted a needle and thread from his bag and started stitching up the gashes. He could repair the skin, but Will didn't know how to replenish Nico's blood. If Nico was going to survive this, he needed a blood donation, and fast. Without looking up from his stitching, Will spoke. Nico has lost a dangerous amount of blood, and he needs more. Now, I don't know what to do. Does the infirmary have, a blood bank or something? Jason asked. Will shook his head. We aren't that advanced. We don't have those kind of resources. Usually patients... He swallowed heavily, memories of lost patients flashing in his head. He refocused himself on stitching Nico up as best he could. Usually patients die before losing this much blood. How is he still alive? Jason wondered, kneeling next to Nico. Will retook Nico's pulse. I don't know, but he's not going to be pretty soon. He's fading. He needs more blood now. Jason looked at Will before holding out his arm. Will considered him quizzically before his eyes widened, realizing what Jason was suggesting. Jason, no, I'm not going to ask you to donate your blood. It's risk. I want to. You said he needed blood fast. Let me donate my own to help him. I want to help him. Jason looked defiant. Will opened his mouth to protest, but Jason continued. No, I want to do this. I don't care about the risks. I want to help Nico. Blood transfusions are incredibly dangerous if your blood types do not match. I don't know his blood type. Do you even know yours? Will asked Jason. Will shook his head. If your blood isn't compatible with his, there would be a severe reaction that might kill him. He's going to die without the transfusion, so let me do it, Jason asserted. I might end up killing you as well. Will's voice rang out into the small bathroom. He looked up from his needle and thread and into Jason's eyes. Tears welled up in Will's eyes. I have never done a transfusion before. I don't understand mortal medicine. I'm terrified I'm going to kill you. That would kill or hurt you both. Jason put his hand on Will's shoulder. I believe in you. You are the best healer this camp's got. I trust you. But if your blood types don't match, Will started. He is dying anyway, frustration lined Jason's words. Look, I know you are scared, but we don't really have another option. He's fading. Will threw his hands up in protest. He thought about getting a sibling to help him, but he assumed that Nico didn't want anyone else to know his secret. He looked into Jason's eyes again. They were determined. The son of Jupiter was going to do this, and wasn't going to take no for an answer. Fine, we will do it your way, Will conceded. We can't take Nico to the infirmary. Too many questions will be asked. So we'll do it here. I need you to get a heart monitor, oxygen tank, and some IVs so that I can do the transfusion and monitor him more easily. There shouldn't be anyone in the infirmary right now, as it is supposed to be my shift. If you do run into someone, do not tell them what you are doing. If anyone asks, ignore them. Go. Jason sprang out of the bathroom. The front door opened and slammed shut. Will turned back to Nico. He picked up where he left off, hastily stitching up the wounds. There were 4 major gashes and 6 or 7 smaller ones. After finishing the thighs, Will decided to move Nico from the bathroom and into the bedroom. He carefully picked Nico up and brought him into the main living area. He carefully placed him on the rug. When Nico was on the ground, Will knelt back down. He picked up Nico's wrist, ready to start stitching that as well. He felt for a pulse. There wasn't one. In alarm, Will dropped his ear down to Nico's chest. There wasn't breathing. No, Will shouted. He began compressing on Nico's chest. You're not dying on me, death boy. He heard the rib crack. That meant he was doing it correctly. He was steady in his compressions. He leaned down and blew air into Nico's lungs. More compressions. He prayed. Let him breathe. He didn't know how long. He continued to do CPR before Jason returned. What's happening? Jason questioned, dropping the needles as he entered the cabin. Jason, Nico's heart stopped and he's not breathing. What do we do? Jason stammered, kneeling back down on Nico's other side. I need to restart his heart, but I don't have a defibrillator on me. Will leaned back down as he blew more air into Nico's lungs. Isn't it just an electrical pulse? Jason questioned. A controlled pulse to the heart, yes. Will's body was tiring. I can do it, Jason asserted. Will lost his rhythm as he looked up at Jason. No, too dangerous. It has to be the right voltage, otherwise you will fry him. Will, please, I can do this, Jason promised. Will continued his compressions as he thought. He doesn't have time for this. Move! Jason ordered, pushing Will away. Hey! Will protested, but it fell on deaf ears. Jason's blue eyes became electric as his hands sparked. He rubbed his hands together before putting them over Nico. Electricity cracked in his hands as he lowered them onto Nico's chest. Nico's body spasmed. Will scurried back over, pulling his ear over Nico's chest. His heart was still stopped. Again, Will asserted, clearing off Nico's body. Jason's eyes crackled as he prepared another shock. He pressed down on Nico again, causing another spasm. Nico gasped in a breath. Will felt for Nico's wrist. He had a pulse. Thank goodness, Will prayed. He crawled over to where Jason had dropped the equipment. He unfurled the heart monitor stickers and quickly attached them to Nico's chest. Under his slightly charged shirt, the machine began beeping, but the heartbeat was still very weak. He also placed the oxygen mask over Nico's mouth and nose. Will then directed Will to sit on one of the trunks that was at the foot of the bunk bed. Jason obliged. Will then took the IV tube that Jason had brought and inserted the needle into Jason's arm. He took the other end of the IV and inserted it into the crook of Nico's elbow. He closed his eyes and murmured a spell over the tube. Hopefully his healing magic would make the blood types compatible. He opened his eyes and looked at Jason. Jason nodded at him. It was time. He fiddled with the IV nozzle, releasing Jason's blood from his arm. Will waited. Will watched with bated breath as the blood flowed from one end of the tube to the other. Jason's blood entered into Nico's bloodstream. Will whipped around to look at the heart monitor. It started beeping rapidly as Nico was exposed to Jason's blood. Will's eyes flashed with fear as he turned back to the tube, praying and singing a hymn of healing. After a couple of tense moments, the monitor stopped beeping as erratically as Nico's heart calmed down. Will let a huge breath of relief. He had almost lost Nico, but it worked. The blood transfusion was working. Will looked up at Jason with a small smile of victory. Jason looked relieved to see Nico breathing again, but he also looked uncomfortable. Watching your own blood be drawn was a little overwhelming for most people. Are you okay? Will asked Jason, placing his hand on his shoulder. Jason nodded slowly, a little lightheaded. His statement prompted Will to search through his bag again. He pulled out an energy bar as well as a vitamin C supplement. He gave this to Jason. Once he ate the bar and took the vitamin, Jason should start to feel better. Will allowed himself to breathe for a moment. His adrenaline was sky high at the moment, and he was still very scared. It was too soon to tell if Nico would be okay, and there was no telling when he would wake up. Will was about to put his head in his hands. Will was about to put his head in his hands when he saw that they were covered in blood, Nico's blood. His shirt was also stained the reddish-brown hue of dried blood. His knees were littered with little cuts from when he had knelt onto the broken mirror. Will grimaced. He usually wore a scrub shirt and clean gloves when working on patients, but this had been an emergency. He walked around Nico to go wash off in the bathroom. He got to the bathroom and remembered that the floor was covered in glass shards. Luckily, he was wearing shoes. He carefully stepped on the broken mirror bits, hearing them crunch even further under his shoes. He made it to the sink and began washing Nico's blood down the drain. He scrubbed his hands for a solid 5 minutes before toweling them off. He went back to his bag to get gloves and began picking up the shards of glasses. And trying not to injure himself, he threw them into the trash can. Once he got every piece into the trash can, he looked back over to Jason. The sun of Jupiter was drooping on a seat. Will rushed over. Hold on, Jason. I'll get you out soon. You are doing a great job. Jason nodded. Will put his hands on Nico's. He closed his eyes to read Nico's blood levels. They were still relatively low, but if Jason gave any more blood, he too would pass out. Okay, Nico's levels are still really low, but yours are too. Let's get you unhooked. He moved to remove the IV, but Jason moved away. No, I'll give as much as I need to keep Nico going, to keep him alive. As Jason spoke, Will saw him losing strength. Although he was stronger than Will, Jason was weak from giving so much blood, so Will grabbed his arm, easily overpowering him. Jason continued to protest, but Will shushed him, removing the IV. He removed it from Nico's arm too. He watched Nico's vitals on the heart monitor, and they stayed level. He let the IV fall and turned his attention to Jason. Jason was looking at Nico with unfocused eyes. Will grabbed a bandage and wrapped Jason's arms to staunch the bleeding. He finished and let go of Jason's arm, expecting him to put it in his lap, but it merely fell. Jason. At his name mentioned 3 times, he finally looked up. His eyes were unfocused and blurred through his glasses. Will sucked in a breath and grabbed some nectar. He grabbed the back of Jason's neck and poured some nectar down his throat. Jason swallowed reflexively, his eyes fluttered shut. Will wondered what he tasted. Will always tasted his mom's cookies from when he was a kid. He blocked out the memories that went with his mother. His mother had some problems when Apollo had left her with Will. She was a heavy drinker, and even though she loved Will, they had a tense relationship. Will had known Apollo from a younger age as he had come to visit him occasionally whenever Will's mother was especially drunk. Will had always felt his father's presence around him, protecting him, blocking out his mother's yelling. His thoughts were interrupted by Jason's eyes opening. He felt a little better, though he still looked exhausted. Okay, Jason, let's get you to bed. You need to rest. You need to get your strength up. He put Jason's arm around his shoulder and lifted. Jason was heavy, but Will had years of training behind him. Jason started to fall asleep on his shoulder. Will managed to get Jason into an empty bunk. Jason fell asleep as soon as he hit the pillow. He grabbed Jason's wrist and checked his vitals. Though his body supply was a little low, he would be okay. Once the nectar worked through his system, he slipped off Jason's glasses before slipping the covers over him. He turned back to Nico. He was stable, but Will wanted to move the son of Hades to a bed. The wires of the heart monitor and oxygen mask were long enough, so he moved the equipment next to one of the bunks. He then carefully lifted Nico and slid him into the bunk. He checked Nico's thighs. Blood was seeping through the stitches. Will reached down into his bag and pulled out white bandages. He wrapped Nico's thighs. After finishing that, he continued stitching the skin on Nico's wrists. He made sure to make these stitches neater as he had more time. Also, his wrists were more likely to be exposed than his thighs. He had been careless with Nico about his self-harm marks on his wrist 2 days prior, but he had been acting out of anger. He understood that Nico didn't want his struggle broadcasted to the entire camp. After about 10 minutes, Will finally finished the stitches. He wrapped Nico's wrists in new bandages before getting up from the trunk he was sitting on. He stretched out his arms, working on the tightness from the excessive CPR. He glanced at his watch. It was already noon. Shit, Will thought. Kayla's probably wondering where I am. He looked back at Nico's vitals. The son of Hades was stable. He walked over to Jason, who was just snoring away. While he wasn't sure about Nico, Will knew that Jason would be all right. Will decided that he could leave his patient alone for a couple of minutes while he got more supplies, including a fresh shirt. He emerged from the darkness of the Hades cabin into the sunlight. Activities were happening as normal. The camp was unaware of the tense situation happening in the Hades cabin. Will made his way home knowing that his cabin would be at archery lessons. He could get in and out without being questioned. He wouldn't run into anyone. With no luck on his side, he did run into someone. Kayla and Piper approached him quickly. Uh-oh, he thought. Piper's eyes lashed onto him. Will, have you seen Jason? He went to go see Nico, and I wondered if you knew. Kayla interrupted her. Is that blood on your shirt? Oh my gosh, what happened? Piper exclaimed, realizing the dark hue. Kayla reached out for him to check his injuries, probably, but Will brushed her hand away. It's not mine, don't worry, Will reassured. Whose is it then? Where's it from? Kayla demanded. From the infirmary. I was refilling bags of blood. But Kayla saw right through his fib. We don't have blood in the infirmary. Anyways, I was just in there and you weren't. That's where I found Piper. She was looking in there for Jason and Nico. Where is Jason? Piper asked. And whose blood is that? Don't worry. It's not Jason's. He's fine. He wasn't flat out lying. Jason was stable and he would wake up in a couple of hours at most. But Piper noticed his hesitation. Will Solace, you tell me where Jason is right now. I can't. Piper looked surprised to see Will raise his voice. I can't tell you. You have to trust me. Jason is going to be okay. He is helping me with something, but I can't really talk to you about it. I can't talk to anyone about. All I can say is that everyone is going to be okay. Who is everyone? Kayla asked. Kayla, I can't. Will looked into his sister's eyes. She stared back into his. Later, he tried to say with his eyes. She backed off, looking back at Piper. It's okay, Piper. I'm sure if something's wrong, William would tell us. Is he hurt? Piper asked. Will! She exclaimed. Piper, you have to trust me, Will pleaded. She stared at him, crossing her arms over her chest. She took a deep breath before speaking. Fine, but if he doesn't show up by the end of the day, I'm reporting to Chiron. I'm worried about him. She stalked away from Will. Will swallowed down his nervousness. He didn't doubt Piper. He looked back to his sister, who was waiting, with their own arms crossed. Well? Will sighed. I can't say. Is it your death, boy? She questioned, but there was no teasing tone in her voice as there usually was. She must have understood the severity of the situation. Will felt his shields go up. What, Nico? He doesn't have anything to do. Kayla's look of disbelief stopped him. He hung his head. Kayla always knew when he was lying. Yes, it's Nico. Did he hurt himself? She asked quietly. Will's head snapped up. Warning tones went off in his head. How do you know? Sadness filled her eyes. It's kind of obvious, and I've been his healer as much as you have. Will sighed. Yes, he did, but I'm handling it. I just need you to cover it for me. Kayla looked deeply into his eyes before breathing out. Fine, but you owe me, and you come to me the moment you need any help. You hear? Will nodded, about to encase her in a hug when he remembered he was still covered in blood. Thank you, Kayla. You won't regret this. Oh my gosh, guys, that was such a long video. This video is just... Oh my mouth is getting so dry, and man, it's so dry. This is such a fun story. I think I've read this about 3 times now, and I thought I'd finally get back to you guys on this. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'll probably do another video soon. I'll probably be filming another video right after this, so don't be surprised. Anyways, like I said, again, please don't like get offended with the whole like when the line went so like kill yourself. I hope that didn't sound like that. I really don't, because that would not be good. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys in the next video. I love you guys so much. Bye.